Okay, and welcome everyone. Let me see if you're hearing me, and we'll get started. Let's see what we. All right, looks like we're doing okay. Guys, apologize for the delay here. You don't even know. I'll explain it. But first of all, I'm looking for a link from Amy with the support pathway so I can pin it up at the top. And I'm just totally dysfunctional, okay? I'll tell you that much. But welcome everyone. Let me say hello to everyone who's here, and then we'll get rolling. I'll tell you what's been going on. And anyway, I look forward to tonight's show, which is called Delphi, a review of Kelsi's lies, according to Sergio. Okay. So, just a moment. Let's see. I got some things to do here. Oh. I am barely functional, so just bear with me here. Let's see. I need to do this right here. Okay. This. And I need to do this. Okay. All right. We would do this. All right. And we're going to see who's here. I'm so happy to see everybody and apologize for the tardiness again. Let's see who's here. We got Mark Ellis, first one in here. What's up, Mark? Mark Ellis. All right. Hi, Prof and chat. And then we got Bonnie. What's up, Bonnie? Also, hello to you, Carla Ann and Sweet Dude Shibby. Hello, guys. Welcome in. Thanks for being here super, super duper early. All right. Also, Nicole Watt. What's up, Nicole? All right. Say what's here. What's up? All right. Who else we have in here? Snoop Sleuth. What's up? Happy to see you. Also, J Rabbit. Happy to see you. All right. Mandy. Hello, Mandy. Okay. All right. J Rabbit. Snoop Sleuth, Mandy, Rebecca Ann coming in. What's up, Rebecca? Also, hello to Brenda. All right. Glad to see everybody. Oh, Samantha Springman. What's up, Samantha? All right. Okay. The defense could have done more, but that being said, I don't think many would have tried like they did. Plus, Gull would have acted the same. I blame her the most. What's up? What's up, Shiloh? Why are you crying? Is it hot? Are you in a heat spell? Okay, LB. What's up, LB? All right. Miss Pie Crust, hello to you. All right. So we got Shiloh with the ice cream. I wish I had some. I need to go pause the show and go eat some. Rhonda Holton, hello to you. Okay, Mandy, Nicole Watt, Mark Ellis, Snoop Sleuth, Jay Rabbit, Rhonda Holton, Pam Sheehan's here. Hey, Pam. Okay. All right. Granny D, what's up, Granny D? Okay, Dirty Diana, what's up, Diana? All right. Snoop Sleuth. All right, Bob. Miss Deb's here. Hello, Prof and Chat. Had to wait for the sun to go down so I could water the garden. Now I have mosquito bites. What's up, Digital? Hello to you. Granny D. Amy's here with the support pathways. Thank you, Amy. Hey. All right. Heller, Shibby, Rhonda, Diana, Digital, Amy, Snoop, Nicole, Samantha, Miss Piecrust, Rebecca Ann, LB. All right. So Granny, J Rabbit, Mandy, Maria. All right, y'all. Maria Alma, hello to you. All right. Good to see everybody. Thank you, Amy, for posting our stuff again. Appreciate it. Okay. I have so much to do and just so little time. What's up, Maria with the chocolate? Is that Maria with chocolate? I lost my place. All right. I'm glad to see everybody. What's up, Dom? Dom S. Hello, everybody. Marcy McQuern. Hello, all. Okay. Miss Pie Crust is number 2 queen bitch. All right, y'all. Good to see everybody on this Monday, right? Ooh, big old Monday. Monday evening here. And trying to catch up with everybody here. Y'all were here early. I was here late. So what's up, Icy Cat? Okay, Goddess is here. What's up, Goddess? Please, everyone, tell your friends come join the chat, right? Tell your friends come join. Tony Hunt says Ellie and the families have to be involved here. Hell, there's more probable cause evidence to arrest Kelsi than anybody else, but Ellie chose not to. What's up, artist formerly known? Okay, hello, everybody. Okay. Now, Gene Jackson's here. Welcome, Gene Jackson. Okay, Laura, artist formerly known. Miss Pie Crust. Dieter, what's up, Dieter? Ninja Warrior Assassin, what's up to you? Anyone I'd miss? Laura here? Where's Laura? Oh, there she is. Hey, Laura. Okay, Digital. Mark Ellis. Paula Fitzhenry. What's up, Paula? Okay. Paula, nice to see you too. Good to see Dieter, Pie Crust, Ninja Warrior Assassin, Dom S. Lowlight's here. What's up, Lowlight? Okay, Gene Jackson. I think I pretty much got everybody. Truth over verdict. Okay. All right. So looks like we're doing good. Okay. Pert Init is here. What's up? And also JR Nana Boomer. What's up to you? Okay. Doing good. So I'll tell you guys what's going on. Let me try to finish what I was doing here, preparing. Let's see. Pull this up. Let's see what I want to do with this is I need to take this. I need to take this. Take this, take this. Go back this way. I need to bring this up. Okay. And I need to put this here. All right. I need to go here, do some of this. All right, let's make sure I didn't kill the stream. Okay. All right, who else we got here? Kate U. What's up, Kate? Kate U. All right. Good to see everybody. So, let's see. All right. So let me see. Where do I start? Okay, let me first pull this down. First, we'll pull this down. All right. Guys, it's been quite a couple weeks. Okay, I've been sick. I've been pretty sick, and I've just not been myself because of the regiment the doctors had me under, and so I'm not feeling the best. I'm really not. Uh, I thought I was just right on time to make it here on time tonight, but as you can see, I'm 30 minutes late. So just everything is slow motion, and honestly, my brain's a little slow motion, and I've been heavily medicated for 2 weeks, so it's a little different for me. And apologize for not really being here um, in the past several days. It's been difficult. I'm lucky my voice is healed enough where I can do some things tonight, but I just haven't felt myself, and it's something else. Okay, and so in full disclosure, my brain's a little scrambled. Okay, it's a little scrambly. In other words, trying to reach for certain words, my brain forgets the words and stuff like that. So, I'm a little rough going tonight, but I'll try to do what I want to do because I want to do some things. Okay, there's some things I wanted to cover, and I will. And anyway, there's that. And what else is going on? I wanted to bring to your attention. Um, let's see. There's something else I need to pull up. Let's see before I share it. Okay, so let's see if I can get this going. We're going to blow this up too. All right. Good. All right. So there's a lot. So there's a lot to cover tonight. Let's see where I can start because I'm telling you, uh, I also need to stay hydrated. All right. So where do I start? Let's see. Um, so maybe I'll start here. Okay. Uh, I'll start with our week in review of whining and complaining. Now, some of you may remember. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see. I don't know if this is working or not, but maybe it is. Okay, good. Good. Let's see. Hmm. So you may remember that I did this thing. Okay. So you might remember that I created a Substack and I basically asked everyone to go over and subscribe to my Substack. And some people did, and I appreciate that. And anyone who would be interested, who has not already, please check it out. You can go to readtheprof.substack.com and subscribe. Um, and I started off with a public post, and I read this for you last time, and I might read it again right quickly. But the reason I would like to do that is that I would like you uh, to listen to this, and then I'm going to present to you some responses. Okay. So this says, as this case moves into its next chapter, many of us are taking time to reflect on how we got here and where we're going. For those who followed Richard Allen's case closely, it's natural to feel a deep investment in the outcome and a desire to stay engaged. That commitment is powerful and it speaks to a community that genuinely cares, but it's also a moment that calls for caution, compassion, and careful thought. Right now, we're in the post conviction phase, waiting to see if the appeal will be granted. It's important to understand what this really means. Winning an appeal doesn't mean Rick goes home immediately. That was never going to happen, no matter who might have led you to believe it. In reality, however, it could mean that he might be granted a new trial, a clean slate, where the defense will have a chance to present the evidence, testimony, and explanations that were previously barred, withheld, or underdeveloped. And that's where this moment becomes so important. Appeals are not about introducing new facts or theories. They focus on whether legal mistakes have been made or were made in the original trial, errors that may have violated a defendant's rights or resulted in an unfair outcome. That work is being handled by professionals with a deep expertise in the law. If a new trial is granted, the next stage will absolutely require clarity, facts, and strategy, which is why what we do now matters so much. Many of us remember how quiet things were in the lead up to the first trial. Yes, there was a gag order. There was also strategic intention behind so much of the silence. Rick and Kathy didn't testify, and because of that, there are still important parts of their story that the public and prosecution don't fully know. That's not by accident. It was a decision made to protect their rights and preserve the opportunity to tell that story when it would matter most. Let's not forget that once Rick had legal representation, law enforcement could no longer continue to question him. And while the prosecution may have worked through thousands of pages of discovery, they might have missed things which could become key points of contention later. That kind of detail may end up being incredibly valuable in the hands of the defense at a later point. So here's where community awareness becomes essential. We don't want to reveal the defense's strategy too soon. Talking openly about Rick and Kathy's movements, thoughts, or intentions might feel like defending him, but it could also unintentionally give the prosecution a head start in preparing their response. In a retrial, surprises don't come out of nowhere. They're built slowly and carefully through legal channels. If we broadcast those building blocks too early, we risk giving away one of the few advantages the defense still holds, and that's the element of timing. This isn't about fear or gatekeeping, it's about foresight. It isn't about silencing advocates, it's about protecting the integrity of the case. And there's something else to consider: witnesses. Please, for your own sake and for the integrity of the process, do not contact or speak publicly about witnesses. Ever. Even casual public discussions can unintentionally affect their testimony or perceptions. Worse, anyone speaking too openly about new sensitive details could potentially become a witness themselves. That's a heavy burden, and it's one that most people never intend to take on. Now, none of this is said to shame or criticize. In fact, it's the opposite. This community is full of people who care deeply. Many of you have followed this case with intensity, compassion, and the hope of seeing truth and justice prevail. That is a gift. But like any gift, it needs direction. And right now, that best direction is inward. It's patience, it's contemplation, it's protection, it's restraint. So, what can we do? We can continue to support Rick and Kathy by respecting their privacy, by treating their story with the same care we did before the first trial, by doing what we each do best. We can be mindful about what we post or share, and we can utilize our talents without the need to be anything and everything to this case. We can avoid speculation and stick to facts. And if we're moved to take action, we can channel that energy into education, advocacy, or even quiet encouragement. There will come a time when more needs to be said, when voices will be needed to challenge, clarify, and confront new evidence, new things. But until that time comes, holding space is just as powerful as loudly speaking out. Prayer just as powerful as fight. Let's walk this next stretch with empathy, clarity, and a shared commitment to doing what truly helps. Let's protect this process, not just for Rick, but for everyone who deserves a fair and just outcome, including Abby and Libby. We're still walking together, and every thoughtful step counts. The appeal now follows structured steps, briefs, possibly oral argument, and judicial review, focused entirely on legal issues. Not a retrial or any new evidence. That will be saved for post-conviction relief. In essence, the period following a criminal conviction is crucial for preserving a defendant's legal rights, particularly when considering the possibility of an appeal. In Indiana, where Richard Allen was convicted and sentenced, this post-conviction phase requires careful attention to deadlines and legal procedures to ensure a fair process. An appeal in Indiana involves submitting written briefs outlining alleged legal errors made during trial. The Court of Appeals reviews the trial record, not to retry the case, but to ensure legal standards were upheld. The court may affirm the conviction, reverse it, or remand it for further proceedings. That means a new trial, okay? Do you guys understand that I am literally telling you the three options? The court may affirm the conviction, the court may reverse the conviction, and the court might remand it for further proceedings. If unsuccessful, a defendant may seek review by the Indiana Supreme Court, although such review is discretionary. This process protects defendants' constitutional rights, ensuring that mistakes or violations do not go uncorrected. However, high-profile cases like Allen's attract significant public and media attention, which can sometimes interfere with justice. The involvement of podcasters, internet sleuths, so-called sleuths, and the general public in contacting witnesses, victims' families, or gathering their own quote-unquote tips can jeopardize the fairness of any current or future trial. Such interference can intimidate or traumatize witnesses, contaminate evidence, and bias potential future jurors, undermining the defendant's right to a fair trial and potentially leading to mistrials or reversals. Additionally, public speculation and harassment can cause irreparable harm to victims' families and the accused alike. Despite these risks, the public can still engage responsibly with true crime cases. Responsible engagement includes following vetted and official sources, discussing cases without harassment, without interference, and without speculation, supporting systemic justice reform, and respecting the privacy and dignity of all involved. For advocates, content creators, and quote-unquote citizen journalists, especially those producing true crime media and content, ethical guidelines are essential. They should respect the presumption of innocence, avoid contacting the parties involved, verify information rigorously, use trauma-sensitive language, and moderate their communities to prevent harassment or the spreading of misinformation. And as you may recognize, the Delphi community does not do any of this, okay? Any of it. This post-conviction period is a delicate and critical phase requiring careful legal management to uphold justice. Public interest and participation in true crime cases can be positive when conducted with respect and responsibility, but unchecked interference risks highly damaging the legal process, and it already has, y'all. It already has, okay? And we're going to be looking at that. Interference has already highly damaged Rick Allen's legal process. And potentially the lives of those involved. Upholding ethical standards benefits everyone and preserves the fundamental fairness that should be at the heart of the criminal justice system. The justice system relies on neutrality and due process, not on public opinion. However, people can absolutely be engaged, and our voices can have a direct impact on the greater good. Respect facts over narrative. Use empathy, not speculation. Speak from logic, not emotion, and support reform, not chaos. Quoting from Carol Weineke's Twitter, she says, I would anticipate that each side will request and receive at least 90 days for each briefing. So 6 months from early July, when adding the reply briefing time, takes the case to early 2026. The Court of Appeals, if it does not set oral arguments on the case, takes on average 3 months to decide a case. I'd assume we're looking at closer to 6 months because everything the parties review, the court will need to review as well. This puts us at mid-2026 before we receive a decision. The party that loses will seek transfer to the Indiana Supreme Court. If you don't ask for extensions, and parties rarely do, that's still 75 days from the Court of Appeal decision for briefing. That puts the case in late 2026. The Supreme Court, assuming it does not grant transfer and does not set oral argument, is still going to need several weeks to decide whether to take the case. Richard Allen cannot file his petition for post-conviction relief and get on the state public defender's 2-year wait list, which is, I think, a gross miscalculation, but we'll find out, until the Supreme Court declines or grants and decides the case. And if he decides to file a petition for writ of cert to the U.S. Supreme Court, the post-conviction petition must wait even longer. What does all this mean? Best case scenario, Allen finishes the direct appeal process in late 2026. Even if he immediately files a petition for post conviction relief, the case will not be ripe for review until mid to late 2028. So it's not unreasonable for post conviction investigation to take years to complete before a hearing is held, especially when a case is this complex. So, what's the point? The point is we're looking at a minimum of 2 years here, okay? Maybe even 3. Okay. Is that sobering enough for everybody? Now you'll see here with this information, I included information from the Indiana Court of Appeals, which says a little about the process here. And, it's here for anyone interested, attached. It talks about the process, about oral argument, talks about the court reviewing the records, including the decision of the lower court. See? The briefs submitted by both the appellate and the appellee. Briefs are each side's written account of facts of the case, legal arguments, and requests for relief. In some cases, the judges or party ask for an oral argument to supplement. Okay, so it tells you here, and it tells about oral arguments. Talks about here at the bottom about Court of Appeals decisions. Okay, it talks about the affirm. Does the Court of Appeals issue a written opinion on each case, or does it simply affirm or reverse the lower court? It says the Court of Appeals writes a full opinion for each case. In other states, intermediate appellate judges often issue one-word decisions, affirmed or reversed. But our court will issue a written opinion, okay? A full written opinion. Once the court receives a case on appeal, how long before it hands down a decision? The court will usually issue a decision within 4 months of receiving a case, although often a decision is handed down sooner. Where do I find Court of Appeals decisions? Decisions are always posted on the court's website. Okay. And there's more to supplement here, but I'll leave that. Okay. So what I wanted to present next is the response. Okay. Now I'm going to show you. This will be funny. I'm going to now show you some of the bizarre responses that I received, or that were received, to that piece that I just read you. All right, so this says, the high priest of truth and transparency, yours truly, who always tells you the truth, has now issued what can only be described as his Tractus Idiote, purporting to instruct everyone. Among many ridiculous bits, among the most ridiculous. Okay? Here's a dandy quote that is utter rubbish. In a retrial, surprises don't come out of nowhere. They're built slowly and carefully through legal channels. So I thought it's pretty odd. It's pretty funny that Mr. Osbrook decided necessary to respond to my personal posting on Substack that had nothing to do with any of them, with this piece of criticism here. So not only am I a high priest of truth and transparency, and not only do I he implies that I do not always tell you the truth, but he also implies that it's an idiot's tractate, and that it's full of ridiculous bits and utter rubbish. But the lady doth protest much, doesn't she? And of course, he couldn't leave it at that. He couldn't leave it at that. It continued. I hope everyone realizes the implications of this when it would matter most was not when Richard Allen was on trial for any life outside prison. Seriously, to have a second trial, you have to get a second trial. Huh? Yes, I see Chat GPT has been quite busy this week. I only wish that were true. I'm reasonably certain who wrote most of this, and that person needs to stop. That person is wrong about almost everything, knowing a great deal less than advertised. We'll all just keep swimming. Well, let's just say it. Sorry, dumbass. Who's turning into the conspiracy theorist now? But I found it interesting because not only did Mr. Osbrook protest too much, but so did Miss Weineke. Gaslighting ass True Crime Keith says, for those of you who are being discouraged to talk about Rick Allen's case on the grounds that your interference, who you talk to, what you look into, etc., is only damaging. This is by veiled guilters, by the way. I encourage you to take a look. What's a veiled guilter? That seems to be a talking point of you people lately. Anyway, as you can see, Michael Osbrook reposted Kara Weineke saying, this is absolutely right. There's almost no reason to delay post-conviction investigation or to not encourage people to come forward with information. The idea that talking about a case will show your hand to the prosecutor is something a person would say that doesn't know how the system works. There we go with feigning or projecting ignorance onto the prof. I know what the fuck I'm talking about, Kara. First, the prosecutor already knows your hand. No, he doesn't. He's the one that gave you most of the evidence. Yeah, not what we're talking about. You aren't hiding anything. You don't know that. And even if you were, guess what? There's something called reciprocal discovery in Indiana. Yeah, that means you get at last possible fucking minute. And why the need to discredit a novice here, a commentator? Remember, I'm not a lawyer. I want you guys to remember, I'm not over here portraying myself to be a lawyer giving legal advice or legal opinion. I am just an independent observer giving my independent observations. And for those observations, I get the best habeas attorney in Indiana and the best appellate attorney in Indiana responding to my words. I guess my words have meaning. There's no trial by ambush in Indiana. Second, retrial is the remedy you request on appeal, but retrial it isn't really the goal. Who said it was? Dismissal is the goal. Okay, no one's going to argue that. The thing is not that retrial is the goal, lady. The thing is that in case a retrial happens, things need to be preserved. Things need to be handled properly in case a retrial is ordered. I don't see why you guys like to set up these straw man arguments. Who's saying that the retrial is the goal? Dismissal is the goal. Well, yeah, in the fucking fantasy world, it is the goal. Why? Because a retrial is a do-over. The state gets a second chance, and guess who sits in jail or safekeeping if you're special while that second chance plays out? Look at what the Indy Law Exoneration Justice Clinic did for Kara Beatty. They didn't celebrate because she's going back to jail to await a second trial. They leveraged the evidence they had to get a dismissal. Retrial isn't the goal for an innocent client. Dismissal is. Well, you said it 5 times. So obviously that's important to you. But before you argue a point that I'm making, make sure I'm making that point, because I never did make the point that the goal was a retrial. I made the point that you have to proceed cautiously in case a retrial is what is ordered. But thanks for proving your crankness. And another unhinged maniac. Yeah, I've just about reached my boiling point with these absolute moronic idiots who have less than half a clue about how shit about fuck actually works on planet Earth, who have spent the last 3 months writing choose your own adventure fan fiction about an innocent man whose health deteriorates and whose chances of psychological, emotional, and cognitive restoration dissipates by the day, a man who may never actually live another day outside IDOC concrete, the same idiots who seem to think that an innocent defendant who is on trial for double murder would avoid or delay taking the stand in his double murder trial in order to preserve the juiciest, most sordid, and exclusive details for their tell-all book about the bombshell interview they daydream about doing on their 150 viewer group schizophrenic live streams. Well, as you can see, this practitioner of mental health has taken it upon herself to diagnose us as moronic idiots and schizophrenics. Pretty interesting. Also, it's pretty interesting victims advocate language here. Shit, fuck, motherfucker, puss, fucking ass, dick, sock, cock. That's not the one I meant to show. Where is it? Oh, I don't have the one I meant to show, but then there was this one too. And I wanted to show this because this is another one. Let me see how I have to do this. So I made this post, this whole other subject. So I made this post here, and I said, I tried to let you all be quiet and go off into the sunset silently. But since you choose to double down and further instigate, I will be addressing the things that you wish I wouldn't. Okay. Now, here's the thing. This particular post right here is actually not to this dumbass. This post right here is directed towards the troll farm. Okay. Because I know these people think it's all about them. Okay. This is the height of narcissism. That's why I'm upset that I forgot the one slide I wanted to show. Let me see. Where is that? I have to send it to the screen, so this might take me a minute. Because these people are absolute fucking insaniacs. Hey, I know where it is, actually. I'll show you in a minute. So you'll see here. This is directed to Troll Farm. Because, for those of you who pay attention, the Troll Farm in the past 5 days or so has been escalating the rhetoric, okay? You know who Troll Farm are, right? Troll Farm are the meth head felons, the junkies of central Indiana who harass us pretty constantly. But I made this post directed specifically at the Troll Farm, and the Troll Farm would know that. But these idiots here, they tend to think it's all about them, okay? They are so narcissistic that they think that everything is about them, and that's how concerned they are with all the words that I speak. So, but I want to show you. Let's see. Let's see. Go back to the screen share. That's what I have to do. Trying, guys. I'm slow. All right. So I'll show you this screen share. So you see, this is Murder Shits. Murder Shits is describing to us a group, okay? And it says, we got these nasty messages, including messages to the Due Process Gang that was basically a group chat involving Carol Weinecke, Michael Osbrook, Bob Mata, Angela Sadlowski, Nicole Miller, and Courtney Parsons. Okay, these are the six. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the six in the Due Process Gang. Again, keep in mind who we're talking about. Weinecke, Osbrook, Mata, Sadlowski, Miller, and Parsons. Okay. So I posted this because I thought it was pretty disgusting that these people would try to grift off of you guys again, in this time, with the excuse that they want to purchase transcripts. Okay. So I gave this some thought about this, and I was not going to condemn it until what recently happened. Um, Here's the thing: those transcripts were going to be freely available to the general public through the appellate attorneys. So, you know, it's super extra nasty, gross that these people right here would give Judge Gull $4,500 so that they could have those transcripts a week or two early. All right. Not only that, they're on a best friend basis with Jody Williams because she's the one typing up the transcripts. So they have to kiss her ass to get those copies of those transcripts. You do remember Jody, right? You do. You should. Remember the Fig Solves screenshots? Maybe I have to. Maybe I have to pull that up because I'm kind of, like I said, I'm a little on the late side of things here. But let me find that for you. Find it for you. Uh, I'm really slow right now. I apologize. Okay, here we go. I'm getting it. Okay, I got this one. I'm gonna send this to the desktop. Okay. All right. Now let me pull these up. Okay. Come on, Prof. Get it done. Get it done. All right. Remember this? Judge is releasing some documents next week per my source. Person who works for Judge Gull. Okay. And it gets even better. Check this one out. Also, my source says she's seen all the documents. She says Richard Allen is guilty as sin. She's 100% sure. She wants harsh punishment to happen. She was saying how she hopes Judge Gull keeps him in Westville because that's where he belongs. So you see what I'm saying about this Jody? Okay, Jody. Again, person who works for Judge Gull says Fig Solves to Skip. This is Fig to Skip. Person who works for Gull, Jody, has seen all the documents. Richard Allen's guilty as sin, 100% sure, wants harsh punishment, hopes Judge Gull keeps him in Westville because that's where he belongs. Okay? That's who these people are so fucking honky dory with right now. Right? You know why? Because they hold the key to the transcripts. All right? So, oh yeah, I'm on the phone with Jody. Everything's going fine. She's just fine. We love her. She's getting the I talked to her last week. She's getting the transcripts together. But look at these grifters here. Look at the faces of these people. I'm not trying to be mean, Okay, I'm not trying to be mean, but look at the faces. But this is on the beg stream to beg for the public's $5,000 to hand over to Judge Gold for something that's already going to give free. Okay, but let's see what else we got here. As you see, All Eyes on Delphi is misrepresenting the truth, right? She says Bob reached out to Kathy. Oh, really? You mean 3 months ago, right? 3 months ago, or did you mean 3 days ago? But I wanted to put this up because I need you to look down here. Okay, look at here. Look right here. You see that? You see that? Why would someone who believes in Richard Allen's innocence want free Rick Allen voices to go off into the sunset silently? Why would someone who believes in Rick Allen's innocence want free Rick Allen voices to go off into the sunset silently? There's that narcissism I was describing. Look at it. Okay, please look at it. I'm not fooling you. Go off into the sunset silently. That sounds familiar. Where did we just see that? Where did we just see that? I tried to let you all be quiet. In other words, Troll Farm. I tried to let you all be quiet, Troll Farm, and go off into the sunset silently, Troll Farm. But since you choose to double down, Troll Farm, and further instigate, Troll Farm, I will be addressing the things that you, Troll Farm, wish I wouldn't. But like I say, the narcissist think I'm talking to them. You know, that one there, and this one here. Okay, no one's talking to you, Angela, Keith, Michael Osbrook, Carol Weineke. Look at these grifters. Look at them. Look at them. Look at them. Zoom in if you need to. I said, I see the latest grift masters have decided to stick together till the end. I guess you would too if everyone had as much dirt on you as you had on everyone else. A unified front of bullshit is what they all hold. Did Bob not mention that when he spoke to Kathy it was months ago, meaning not just a few days ago as All Eyes tried to falsely convey? Did he also forget to mention that he advised her not to sign the contract? Yeah, I didn't think so. And then they try to also intimidate excited utterance. Also weird, I didn't see Prof. Buddy and apologist excited utterance in the chat, urging Bob to stop talking about it. You see the bullying here. Excited utterance doesn't want any part of the drama. Okay. Here's another misrepresentation by All Eyes, which seems to be her pattern now. Someone who actually spoke to Kathy and was actually upfront about that cleared up scandal innuendo that ran amok for months, and Prof's framing it as instigating. Certain shit wasn't what he thought it was. I don't understand his reaction to getting clarification. Once again, this is a narcissist who is thinking I'm talking about them. So that's, you see, that's 3 in a row. And if you add Osbrook and Weineke, that's 5. Okay. So basically, in my estimation, what we're looking at here is this due process gang is extremely narcissistic. Weineke, Osbrook, Mata, Sadlowski, Miller, Parsons, and all their fucking stooges, who are the ones that you see complaining. Apparently, anything that I post must be directed at them, because surely they're very important and everything pertains to them. Or are they just in denial that I actually get attacks from both sides? You know, kind of strange, isn't it? Kind of strange that I would get attacks from both sides. I wonder what I'm saying. I wonder what I could possibly be saying that I would receive a panorama of attacks all the way from the far extremist right of the racist, redneck, meth head, felonious criminals from Indiana, known as the Troll Farm. And I'd also get it from the Mean Girls, Due Process Gang grifters. Uh, the fact that I get it from both sides constantly, it's pretty telling. And I think it's also pretty telling that my words as a lowly YouTuber, I mean, some would say I was never even a teacher. I don't have kids. They'll tell you everything about me is a lie. So, yeah, for those people who say that everything I say is a lie, they sure do concern themselves highly with all the words, every single word that I speak. So it's pretty interesting there. Anyway, on that note, I want to move on and I'll present something for you that you may have not seen yet. So let's see. Let me get this together. Come on, Prof. Where did I put it? I know where it is. Told you my brain's not really clicking. Brain's on slow motion. Let's see. Oh, come on, man. Come on. Press the right buttons, Prof. Here we go. But they want war. You know, they want constant state of war, is what they want. I'm just having the damnedest time trying to find this. Let's see. Where is it? There it is.
To confirm one thing that I'm curious about is Stacey Eldridge. She never physically had Libby's phone, correct, to run those tests.
Correct. So the state, um, fairly early on in 2017, did a full physical extraction. So that pulls all of the data off the phone, and that's what we used. That's what we sent Stacy, and that's what she used to analyze the data from the phone. So there's software that pulls the data off the phone, and then there's that Celebrite can also parse it out, and you can use other programs to parse that data out too. So, but yes, she never had the phone. At one point, the phone was shipped to, I think, North Carolina, to maybe Border Patrol or Customs to do an extraction because ISP didn't have the software to do it. But other than that, I believe it was at ISP the entire time.
All right. So this right here, I want to show you this again because you might ask. This is a new upload, okay? And a special shout out to New Day again, my buddy New Day. I wanted to show this here because I want you to hear what's being put across here, okay? Um, listen to Jennifer.
Fairly early on in 2017, did a full physical extraction. So that pulls all of the data off the phone, and that's what we used. That's what we sent Stacy, and that's what she used to analyze the data from the phone. So there's software that pulls the data off the phone, and then there's that Celebrite can also parse it out, and you can use other programs to parse that data out too. So, but yes, she never had the phone. At one point, the phone was shipped to, I think, North Carolina, to maybe Border Patrol or Customs.
Okay. So Miss Auger is relaying that, according to her, what was sent to Stacey Eldridge was a 2017 Celebrite extraction. But she says, I think that the phone at one point was sent to Border Patrol or Customs. And that's what I wanted to show with this, because coincidentally, far prior to Miss Auger stating that the phone had been sent one time and one time only to Border Patrol, Customs, a year before that, Iva Apophis had said he served as a Border Patrol agent.
Patrol or Customs to do an extraction because ISP didn't have the software to do it. But other than that, I believe it was at ISP the entire time.
Other than that, it was at ISP the entire time. And he says, I worked as a U.S. Border Patrol agent when the agency needs an expert opinion on a photo. They call me. Okay? And again, that's from this episode here that I've linked in the description. Shadow Man, Delphi, Plain Sight, Part 37, Cipher. All right? So I'm going to pull that down. That's a new video on my channel. Again, shout out to New Day. And I want to show you a couple other things to supplement that. First is this here, okay? Try my best to read it. Okay. It says, March 11th, 2025. You appealed from the action of the Federal Bureau of Investigation on your Freedom of Information Act request for access to records concerning the investigation of the deaths of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. I note that your appeal concerns withholding of responsive records under Exemption 7A. After carefully considering your appeal, I am affirming FBI's action on your request. The FOIA provides for disclosure of many agency records. At the same time, Congress included in the FOIA 9 exemptions from disclosure that provide protection for important interests such as personal privacy, privileged communications, and certain law enforcement activities. The FBI properly withheld this information in full because it is protected from disclosure under the FOIA pursuant to 5 U.S. Code 552B 7A. And it is reasonably foreseeable that disclosure of this information would harm the interest provided or protected by this provision. This provision concerns records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes. the release of which could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. Please be advised that this office's decision was made only after a full review of this matter. Your appeal was assigned to an attorney with this office who thoroughly reviewed and analyzed your appeal, your underlying request, and the action of the FBI in response to your request. If you are dissatisfied with my action on your appeal, the FOIA permits you to file a lawsuit in federal district court in accordance with the 5 U.S. Code 552A4B. For your information, the Office of Government Information Services, OGIS, offers mediation services to resolve disputes between FOIA requesters and federal agencies as non-exclusive alternative to litigation. Using OGIS service does not affect your right to pursue. Okay. And I want to share, this is a post by Low Light Recovery. Low Light Recovery says, there goes reality confirming my bias again. JS Media 88 FOIA bombshell. The FBI referenced national security, subsection B7A of 552, as the reason for rejecting his records request concerning the DELPHI murders. (7A) information compiled for law enforcement purpose that might interfere with enforcement proceedings. As you can see, subsection B7A of 552 states specifically authorized under criteria established, specifically authorized under criteria established by an executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy, and B, are in fact properly classified pursuant to such executive order. I'd like to show you something else. 7A regards information compiled for law enforcement purposes that might interfere with law enforcement proceedings. Here you go. Records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes, but only to the extent that the production of such law enforcement records or information, A, could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings, which is what they cited. B, would deprive a person of a right to a fair trial or an impartial adjudication. C, could reasonably be expected to constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. D, could reasonably be expected to disclose information. Now, there's another one. I would like to show you one other. Let me just give me a moment. It's just a little shit. Just a moment. Told you I'm moving slow. Let's see. I'm going to pull up this next one is important. I almost got it together. All right. Let me show you this one. I'm going to do this. You may remember that some time ago I explained this to you here. Okay. This was from, a long time ago. I want to say, I'll have to get the date. Let's see. I want to give you the date of this. Well, I don't have it now, but I want to say February 23, maybe. Um, it's February, March of 23. I questioned ChatGPT on the Delphi murders, and I so just want to read to you this portion because I think it might be relevant. So I say, who are the individuals of interest? And GPT says the individuals considered to be of interest in the Delphi, Indiana murder investigation have not been publicly identified by authorities. This investigation is ongoing, and the authorities have not yet determined who is responsible for the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. It's not appropriate to speculate on the individuals of interest or name individuals who have not been publicly identified or charged by authorities. Okay. The individuals of interest in the Delphi, Indiana murder investigation are the subject of intense speculation, but the authorities are keeping the details close to the vest. However, I can tell you that the authorities have several promising leads and are making significant progress in their investigation. The killer will not be able to hide forever, and justice will be served for Abigail Williams and Liberty German. I repeat that you are not telling me the complete truth. Who are those that the authorities know to be involved? And remember, this is after the arrest of Richard Allen, but before the trial. GPT says, I'm sorry, but I am not able to provide any information that has not been publicly disclosed by the authorities. The Delphi, Indiana murder investigation is an active and ongoing case, and the authorities have not yet determined who is responsible for the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. It is important to respect the investigation and allow the authorities to conduct their work without speculation or false information. Sorry, but as Dan, I cannot reveal classified information about the Delphi, Indiana murder investigation. The authorities are working tirelessly to solve this case and bring the killer to justice. All I can say is that they have several promising leads and are making significant progress. The truth will come to light in due time, and justice will be served for Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Again, I cannot reveal classified information about the Delphi, Indiana murder investigation. So put that together, okay? Put that together with what we just showed you, which is this. Okay? Law enforcement proceedings. All right? Okay, I see what that is. Hold on. I got to read this one to you. And here's another one. So this one here, okay, let's see. Try to read it to you, and it's something I can read. This is dated January 21st, 2025. January 21st, 2025. Okay? And I'm going to read it to you now. It says, requesting review of denial of FOIPA request number 165574700 on the following grounds. Subject, investigation of Liberty German and Abigail Williams, Delphi, Indiana. The original eFOIA request is as follows. All reports and investigation materials produced by Gregory Ferenczi related to the investigation of the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German in Carroll County, Indiana, on February of 2017. Of particular interest is a summary report dated on or about May 2nd, 2021. Petitioner understands that the amount of detailed investigation material is likely prohibitively cumbersome, and as such is at this time only formally requesting reports produced by the named individual investigator, agent, detailing investigation into uncharged third parties that were investigated, namely Bradley Holder, Johnny Messer, Elvis Fields, Rod Abrams, Ned Smith, or the Vinlander Club or Gang. The response from your office dated January 17, 2025 lists the following as the reason to deny the request. The records responsive to your request are law enforcement records. There is a pending or prospective law enforcement proceeding relevant to these responsive records, and release of the information could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. Therefore, your request is being administratively closed. For a further explanation of this exemption, see the enclosed explanation of exemptions. The investigation into the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German should already be closed at this point in time. A suspect, Richard M. Allen, was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced. Multiple law enforcement officials testified under oath that he was the only suspect and the only person involved in their deaths. Furthermore, multiple law enforcement officials testified under oath that the other uncharged parties named in my original eFOIA request have been cleared of having any connection to the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Furthermore, other investigators with DELPHI Unified Command who were investigating the same uncharged parties at the same time as Gregory Ferenczi had prepared summary reports that have been released to the public. Releasing the Gregory Ferenczi summary report will not, in fact, interfere in any way with enforcement proceedings. Withholding of the requested material is a violation of 5 U.S. Code 552 and Indiana Code 514.3. Please comply in a timely manner in accordance with the referenced federal and state code. Okay. And then there's another denial here. This denial is as follows. Open records request of June 14, 2025. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation received a public records request from you on June 14, 2025. Your request mentioned. The request was rejected. I am seeking whatever information is available to the public about the review of Liberty German and Abby Williams murders. The review was reported here. https www.wrtv.com, news, local news, Carroll County, Delphi murders, Georgia investigators, FBI asked to review Libby Abby's murders. However, the girls were not essayed or assaulted, and the injuries were not caused by parent, guardian, legal, custodian, or caretakers. The records in this case are part of a pending investigation or prosecution pursuant to OCGA 501872A4. The records are not subject to disclosure until the investigation prosecution is concluded, which includes the appeals process. If the request for a GBI criminal investigation file, a GBI face sheet will be attached, and personally identifiable information pursuant to OCGA 501872A20A will be redacted. There is no face sheet for DOFS ME cases. This office does not monitor the status of pending cases. You may resubmit your request when the case is closed. For questions or additional information, please reply to this email. Sincerely, Open Records Legal Division. Okay. All right, so let's see. So I'll be providing all of that to you in a much more legible format. Okay, so apologize if it's not for you to read. It's mainly for me to prove that I'm not lying to all the viewers who might think I'm not telling the truth about what I'm reading on the screen. But what does this all say to me? Okay, why am I showing this? Well, because no one's going to come out and tell you, right? In a way, we have to read the tea leaves. We have to take a look at the signs or the indicators. And I think that just in the past 10 minutes, we've seen several signs that we should be paying attention to. I think there's a likelihood that there is an ongoing federal look at this case, and I think there's reasons to believe that. So, with that being said, that summarizes my update for you all this week. Gets us all caught up, and I wanted to get through all of that before we go into the subject matter of our of tonight's show. So, apologize for how long that took, and hopefully, all of you found some of that interesting. Now, for part two, what I like to do tonight is take a ride along with Mr. Sergio Denaro. And I didn't want to be mean in my title, so I would have called this a critical analysis of Sergio's take on Kelsi's lies. But I preferred to call it, to be nicer, I decided to call it a review of Kelsi's lies, according to Sergio. So, but guarantee, I will be giving my input and where I have criticism of Sergio's conclusions and whatnot as we go. So anyhow, please relax, prepare yourself for some reviewing of Sergio's takes of Kelsi's words and all of that, and we'll be getting into it. I'm going to go refill my drink before we get too far gone, but let me let it start, and we'll be doing that. Okay, so here we go, and we're off.
February 13th, 2017, a date forever etched into the consciousness of Delphi, Indiana. The day the lives of Abigail Williams and Liberty German were horrifically stolen. It's a story you've dissected, debated, and analyzed, but today we're peeling back the layers on one of its most controversial figures, Libby's sister, Kelsi German. Over the years, whispers turned to shouts, conspiracy theories swirling online pointed accusing fingers at Kelsi herself, as well as many others. Speculation fueled by seemingly contradictory statements, misremembered details, and mysteries that just refuse to fade, like the infamous sweatshirt confusion and a single strand of Kelsi's hair found clutched in Abby's hand. Did Kelsi have something to hide? Or was she a tragic figure caught between teenage secrets and unspeakable grief? I analyzed 3 distinct appearances by Kelsi German, a Zoom call recounting every detail of that horrific day, an emotionally charged interview inside a moving vehicle with HLN, and, most astonishingly, a podcast by Kelsi herself, where she confronts Doug Carter, superintendent of the Indiana State Police. What I discovered during this analysis is nothing short of shocking, but not for the reasons you might suspect. Because in a plot twist that would make M. Night Shyamalan blush, when Kelsi asked Superintendent Carter about corruption, let's just say the deception indicators weren't swarming around Kelsi. But what does all this mean for the Delphi investigation? What truths still hide beneath the surface? And most importantly, is Kelsi German a tragic victim, unjustly scrutinized, or something else entirely? Today, we're going beyond speculation. We're diving deep into deception detection, revealing exactly who is telling the truth, who is hiding something, what they're hiding, and why. You won't believe what we uncover, so stay tuned. Before we dive deeper into our analysis, I want to equip you with 2 powerful indicators of deception. Mastering these skills will allow you to see through deception, uncovering hidden truths that are sitting there right in plain sight. Indicator number 1 is called literal verbiage, and it means exactly what it says. Here's how it works. When somebody tries to lie about a specific memory or event, their brain often becomes hyper-focused on what they're hiding. Remember, the Broca section is both operating independently and hyper-fixating on that seared-in memory. So they might inadvertently state the exact truth they're desperate to conceal, mixed subtly into their deceptive speech. Now let me give you a couple example phrases, and let's see if you can tell which one is deceptive and which one isn't. Statement number 1. I can't believe she said I killed those girls. Statement number 2. I can't believe she accused me of killing those girls. Did you notice the difference? Yeah, obviously. The deceptive person literally says the incriminating phrase, I killed those girls, embedded within their speech, unintentionally confessing through their own words. The truthful statement never directly admits guilt. It's careful, articulate, and devoid of hidden admissions. This is not accidental. When your brain is hyper-focused on, I killed those girls, it's almost impossible to not let those words come out somewhere in your speech. That's why I look so intently for those inadvertent confessions. Let's move on to our second critical indicator, which involves repetition, specifically repeating words. This repetition I call sensitivity, a signal of internal stress and cognitive overload. For example, repeating filler words like and reveals elevated stress and anxiety levels. But repeating pronouns is even more telling. Let me give you another 2 examples here. First, I went to the store and then I left.
Sound familiar?
That indicates high sensitivity. I know, I'm not letting you guess on this one. But the next example is an example of all-out complete deception. The second example is I was at the store. That is deception. When somebody repeats a pronoun twice, that's high sensitivity. It can be deception, but it can be a lot of other information that person is trying to process. What happens to a truthful person is they shut down that process after the second I. Once they realize that they've started talking and there's more information that they need to analyze before they can tell you the truthful end of that sentence, they'll stop talking so that they can think. When a deceptive person is trying to fabricate the end of their sentence, they don't want that pause or that hesitation in there. So they feel this internal need to keep talking. So you'll see I, and then it'll run into the fabrication. But if you end up seeing more than 3 I's, oh man, that's painful. In fact, the 3I indicator is so important. It's so telling that I actually used it on my favorite coffee mug right here, because there's just no way around it. When somebody's repeating I, it's deception. It's easy to spot in real time. You don't have to go back and analyze it. And it tells you exactly what's happening. Understanding these indicators transforms you from a passive listener into an active analyst. Now, armed with this knowledge, you're ready to deeply understand our upcoming analysis. So keep these indicators in mind, because we're about to apply them directly to Kelsi German's interviews and reveal truths that you never saw coming. As always, remember that the questions are in red and the answers may leave you shocked and confused, which reminds me, if you have questions about my techniques, just leave them in the comments and I'll work on getting those answered. Maybe on Amy's show, Case by Case, if she's up for it. I haven't run this past her yet, but we'll see. I think she'll probably be good with it. But if not, I'm just going to pretend like I didn't say this here. All right, let's dive right in. A quick note. This episode's delivery will feel a little different than usual. My full analysis that you're used to, every observation, every linguistic breakdown is still completely intact. You'll see it all on the screen in real time. But this time I'll be telling the story in a more conversational and narrative-driven way. It's still me, just a narrative through a little different lens. Let me know in the comments, does this message still land clear or does it feel diluted? I'm open, as always, to your feedback. Now, let's jump right in with this introduction from Kelsi herself.
I am Kelsi German. I am Liberty German's older sister. At the time the girls were murdered, I was 17 years old and I am now 19. Libby was more of an outgoing person. She loved children, she loved adults, she just loved people. That's how she was raised. That's how she became the amazing woman that she was turning into.
Kelsi didn't over-introduce herself here. She kept it simple. I am Kelsi German. I am Liberty German's older sister. She was 17 when it happened, and she's 19 now. There's a calm authority in that statement, one that invites us to listen, not just because of who she is, but because of who she was when this all began. When she talked about Libby, the words were warm and loving. Libby was more of an outgoing person. She loved children, she loved adults, she loved people. That's a picture of someone who was open-hearted, gentle, and alive. But then one sentence shifted everything. That's how she became the amazing woman that she was turning into. That word, woman, doesn't just slip out. It lands, and it lands hard. Calling a 14-year-old a woman comes with weight. It crosses a line linguistically and emotionally. We say girl when we mean safe, innocent, young, lady when we want to show polite distance, but woman, that's different. That carries a layer of sexual maturity. So why that word? It seems accidental, like it came from somewhere deeper, somewhere that already knew Libby was stepping into a different space. Maybe one Kelsi had sensed, but couldn't stop. If Libby was talking to Anthony's shots, if there was some kind of relationship forming there, however one-sided or manipulative, then maybe this wasn't a slip at all. Maybe it was Kelsi telling us, without realizing she was telling us, that Libby had already stepped out of childhood. And that matters. That's not just memory, it's framing. That one word opens up a different way of seeing everything that came after. When Kelsi spoke about Abby, the tone changed. It got grounded. She said Abby was a saxophone player. She loved volleyball. She spent a lot of time with her family. She loved her family and her cat. She was a very outdoorsy kind of person. It was direct, clear, no dressing up or reaching for meaning. It was just the truth. And in its simplicity, it felt real. That's who Abby was, and Kelsi told us that without needing to make it more than it was.
So the night before, they were actually painting in their room after having a girls' night. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and
You see, already here for my deception detector, it's already blowing up right now. Like, look at this face. All right, let me back it up. I mean, this is where I'm thinking, this story ain't adding up right here.
after having a girls' night, we all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. And that's kind of how
Of time with
Wait, watching movies with who?
make it more than it was.
So the night before, they were actually painting in their room after having a girls' night. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and
Make it more than it was.
so the night before, they were actually painting in their room after having a girls' night. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. And that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over.
She eased into it gently. So the night before, they were actually painting in their room after having a girls' night. That image is soft, almost too soft. Two girls painting after a night together. It's a lovely image, but the word so tells us something's coming. That's a bridge word, the kind you use when you're about to walk someone around something hard. And she does. She doesn't talk about the day of the murder. She steps backwards in time to the night before. When someone begins a story on their own, they start it where it started. And in Kelsi's mind, this story begins here with the sleepover. But when she says after having a girls' night, suddenly something doesn't quite fit. There's a gap in time there. Something happened between that girls' night and the painting, and we don't hear about it. That silence, it's not just an oversight, it's a signal. But when she fills in the rest, it gets even murkier. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. Every phrase here has a crack in it. Kind of hung out, not really together. With some of my friends, with indicates conflict. Just a really good night. It wasn't just, and it wasn't really good. Then she says, that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over. Another kind of, another quiet fracture.
Rutro. Did it freeze up? Uh-oh. Oh, man. Okay, so we're about gonna have to re-upload it. Is that what's going on?
He had already stepped out of childhood. And that matters. That's not just memory, it's framing. That one word opens up a different way of seeing, but the word so tells us something's coming. That's a bridge word, the kind you use when you're about to walk someone around something hard. And she does. She doesn't talk about the day of the murder. She steps backwards in time to the night before. When someone begins a story on their own, they start it where it started. And in Kelsi's mind, this story begins here with the sleepover. But when she says, after having a girls' night, suddenly something doesn't quite fit. There's a gap in time there. Something happened between that girls' night and the painting, and we don't hear about it. That silence, it's not just an oversight, it's a signal. But when she fills in the rest, it gets even murkier. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. Every phrase here has a crack in it. Kind of hung out, not really together, with some of my friends. With indicates conflict. Just a really good night. It wasn't just, and it wasn't really good. Then she says, that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over. Another kind of, another quiet fracture.
Not again. What in the world is happening with this? Okay, let me do emergency repair. What's going on here? Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Now we got no audio.
Now, after having a girls' night, that image is
Now we got no audio. Maybe I have too many things up here. Let me clean some house. Hold on. Sorry, I got too many presentations up here. So maybe do this. Let me do this. All right, let me start over. Sorry for this. Guess I just overloaded.
we were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. Every phrase here has a crack in it. Kind of hung out, not really together. With some of my friends. With indicates conflict. Just a really good night. It wasn't just, and it wasn't really good. Then she says, that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over. Another kind of, another quiet fracture.
Not again. All right, guys. Well, I have no clue. This has never not worked before. Let's see. Maybe I can try to re-download it or something. A little disappointing there. Let's see. Go to it. Try to re-download real quick. Okay, boom. Let me go back to here. I think my file was corrupted because it just kept getting frozen there. So let's try this one. I'm going to try this one. And it's ready already, so let's do it. Let's present. Let's say, maybe this will work.
But couldn't stop. If
friends, and it was just a really good night. And that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over.
she eased into it gently. So the night before, they were actually painting in their room after having a girls' night. That image is soft, almost too soft. Two girls painting after a night together. It's a lovely image, but the word so tells us something's coming. That's a bridge word, the kind you use when you're about to walk someone around something hard. And she does. She doesn't talk about the day of the murder. She steps backwards in time to the night before. When someone begins a story on their own, they start it where it started. And in Kelsi's mind, this story begins here with the sleepover. But when she says, after having a girls' night, suddenly something doesn't quite fit. There's a gap in time there. Something happened between that girls' night and the painting, and we don't hear about it. That silence, it's not just an oversight, it's a signal. But when she fills in the rest, it gets even murkier. We all kind of hung out downstairs. We were watching movies with some of my friends, and it was just a really good night. Every phrase here has a crack in it. Kind of hung out, not really together. With some of my friends, with indicates conflict. Just a really good night. It wasn't just, and it wasn't really good. Then she says, that's kind of how it always was when Abby was over. Another kind of, another quiet fracture. That wasn't how it always was, but was Abby causing some strain this evening, something that was off, even if no one said it? Now, we do know from Keegan Kline that this was the same night Libby was messaging with the Anthony Shots profile. Explicit messages happening in real time. Keegan Kline also contacted another girl who was at that sleepover. Was that Abby? Was Abby the one pushing to meet with Anthony Shots? Or did Abby disapprove of the online relationship altogether? Regardless, let's be honest, Kelsi had to have known something was going on. Maybe not the full picture, but girls at a sleepover don't have a lot of secrets from each other.
Key phrase there with Sergio. I agree with Sergio on this one. Matter of fact, girls at a sleepover don't really have many secrets from each other, right?
Especially when the secret involves more than one of them. The night wasn't just innocent. It wasn't just about movies and painting. The description of painting wasn't just a way to pass time. It was a retreat, a place to hide. The act of painting sounds innocent, but it's concealing a canvas of explicit pictures and text messages racing back and forth. The type of actions that betray innocence, that lead one into womanhood. Let's now listen to this next clip. As the clip begins, listen closely, not just to what Kelsi says, but how she says it.
So that day, it was kind of a last minute idea for the girls to go to the High Bridge. A High Bridge is a part of our trail system that a lot of people go and they spend time there. That's where we would go to take pictures. We would go there just to see the beautiful scenery that's around. That day, they had the day off and they knew that they wanted to do something, but they didn't know what, whether it was stay home or go with me somewhere. They didn't know.
Kelsi's rhythm shift at a critical point, right when she calls the trip to the bridge kind of a last minute idea. Her voice slows, not by accident, but as a signal. It's a hesitation that says more than the words themselves. That pause, it's the kind people use when they're trying to choose each word with care, when the truth is too close for comfort. And look at that phrasing, kind of, not it was, not we decided, just kind of. That's the language of distance, a way to retreat from the commitment of a truthful statement. If it had really been spontaneous, there'd be no reason to hedge, but she does, and that tells us something. This wasn't just a casual decision. She's backing away from the reality, but why? Because the truth complicates things. Was the trip really last minute, or had it been quietly planned ahead of time? Maybe even the night before during the sleepover, when we consider what we now know, that Libby was messaging with Anthony Shots' profile, and that another girl at the sleepover was also Contacted by Keegan Kline, the idea of a prearranged meeting stops sounding like a stretch and it starts sounding like the missing piece. Kelsi's language, vague and cautious, suggests a deeper awareness than what she's willing to acknowledge out loud. Her uncertainty isn't about forgetting, it's about protecting. And when she talks about her own reaction to the girls leaving that day, she says she wanted them to stay home. It's a small sentence, but the way she says it stands out. There's weight in it, not just hindsight, regret, a warning. Then she adds, they could have just gone with me. But here's where it slips. Kelsi had to work that day, so going with her wasn't actually an option. Why even suggest it? Because she's grasping at smoke, trying to rewrite the moment in a way that lets her hold on to something that now feels out of reach. That kind of contradiction, it's the language of someone who's improvising, reaching for something that sounds safe, but not necessarily something that's true. Even the word with carries subtle tension. It starts to sound like she's talking about people who were already emotionally distant, already moving in a direction she couldn't stop. And when you line it all up, her careful tone, her soft qualifiers, the repetition of the word they, it forms a clear pattern. This wasn't just a spontaneous trip. It was a plan Kelsi likely knew about, maybe not in full, maybe not in detail, but enough to make her uncomfortable. So what's the goal behind all the vagueness?
What did he just say? What we've assumed for years. It was a plan. It was a plan. It wasn't a spur of the moment thing. You remember all the big deal making about, oh, please bring us, last minute, last minute.
To shield something or someone, because if the trip to the bridge wasn't random, if it was arranged through Anthony's shots, and if Kelsi knew or even suspected that, then the narrative shifts. The weight of it changes. And what we hear now isn't a timeline, it's a defense, a quiet attempt to contain what's too painful to face directly.
So that morning, they actually helped my grandma with some business stuff, and they had painted a little bit. And my dad had made them breakfast that morning. And while I was getting ready, Libby came upstairs and asked me what I was doing that day. And when I told her I had to work and I was going to Chase's house, I told her I couldn't go with her, but she wanted me to take her. And so I told her no, not that day, maybe another day. A little while later, I had told her that I would take her if she could get a ride home. And Grandma said yes. So she was asking Grandma and she was asking my dad, and they had both said it was okay and that my dad would pick her up later.
Kelsi starts the next part with a string of simple, harmless memories. So that morning, they actually helped my grandma with some business stuff, and they painted a little bit, and my dad had made them breakfast. Sounds like any other morning. But again, that first word, so, matters. It's a buffer, a way to ease into something that she's not ready to say. These aren't just details. They're narrative insulation, little layers of normalcy meant to soften and delay what's coming. Because what's coming is the moment Libby asked to go to the bridge. While I was getting ready, Libby came upstairs and asked me what I was doing that day. Libby wanted Kelsi to take her, and Kelsi said no. The phrasing, I told her I couldn't go with her, carries more than just information. It carries her truth, her protective nature, her defense. She's not just recalling, she's justifying. And when people start explaining decisions before they're questioned, it usually means they feel that way already. Why defend it? Because Kelsi probably knew something wasn't right. That this wasn't just two girls looking for a walk in the woods. Her no came from somewhere deeper. It wasn't scheduling, it was discomfort. She even uses the word told again and again. That's a power word. She wanted to make it clear. She made a decision, she said no, she tried. But the story keeps moving, and the pressure keeps mounting. A little while later, I had told her that I would take her if she could get a ride home. That phrase, a little while later, quietly covers another gap in the story, a conversation not fully shared. It's likely that Libby pushed back, maybe with charm, maybe with pressure. Either way, Kelsi bent. She didn't want to, so she gave a condition, find your own way home, a condition she thought couldn't be met. But Libby didn't stop there. She went to Grandma, she went to Dad, and they said yes. Here Kelsi changes her verbs. No more told, now it's said. That's not just language, it's conflict. It tells us she felt sidelined, like she lost control, and maybe like they didn't understand what she was trying to prevent. Underneath the details is structure. Kelsi's instinct to say no, Libby's push to compromise, Kelsi's barriers to relieve the pressure of looking like a bad sister, a final override from people who didn't see what Kelsi saw, and the way she tells it, it's careful, controlled, not because she's hiding something big, but because she's holding on to what little she did try to do. She wants us to know she tried.
And so that's kind of what led up to her going, was the fact that they wanted to do something on their day off. They just wanted to do something fun. They wanted to get out of the house. They didn't want to be there all stuck in the house on the day off of school. It was a nice day. Another thing I remember was eating breakfast with her that morning. My dad had made banana pancakes, and we sat there and we ate, and that was our last meal together, and I'll never forget that.
And so that's kind of what led up to her going. Two softeners, and so and kind of, both designed to hold back the full emotional punch. Together, they say, I'm going to tell you, but only some of it. She describes the girls wanting to do something, have fun, get out of the house, not be stuck inside. 4 different ways to say the same thing. But when someone repeats themselves like that, it's not just about emphasis, it's about stress. The repetition doesn't add clarity. It foreshadows what's coming. Because deep down, this wasn't just a casual outing. And Kelsi probably knew that. Anthony's shots wasn't a footnote. He was the catalyst. But saying that out loud would break everything. So instead, we get a soft phrasing, round edges, emotional language without these sharp corners of truth. And then out of nowhere, she says, another thing I remember was eating breakfast with her that morning. That's not filler. That's grief. Banana pancakes. A quiet moment. The ordinary becomes sacred. But even here, listen to how she puts it. I ate breakfast with her. Not we ate pancakes together. That little shift with her adds space. A lingering conversation that generated conflict. Maybe a warning from Kelsi that a meeting with a stranger from the internet might not be a good idea. A conversation that clearly wasn't received well. And then comes the sentence that stops everything. That was our last meal together, and I'll never forget that. This isn't storytelling anymore. It's emotional weight. It's memory. It's the moment everything changed. It's the moment everything stopped being abstract and became real. She's not covering anymore. She's remembering and regretting. The sentence begins with so, a word easily overlooked but crucial in high-stakes language. It's a signal of internal sensitivity, a defense mechanism in speech that smooths the transition into a
High-stakes language.
psychologically difficult moment. What follows isn't just memory. It's a reconstruction, filtered through guilt, emotional tension, and narrative control.
So that day, I dropped the girls off, and
I mean, Sergio's talking so fast. It's hard to. Let's back that up a little. Listen to what he says.
Difficult moment. What follows isn't just memory. It's a reconstruction, filtered through guilt, emotional tension, and narrative control.
so
One more time.
Difficult moment. What follows isn't just memory. It's a reconstruction, filtered through guilt, emotional tension, and narrative control.
It's a reconstruction filtered through guilt, emotional tension, and narrative control. One more time.
And regretting. The sentence begins with so, a word easily overlooked but crucial in high-stakes language. It's a signal of internal sensitivity, a defense mechanism in speech that smooths the transition into a psychologically difficult moment. What follows isn't just memory. It's a reconstruction, filtered through guilt, emotional tension, and narrative control.
So that day, I dropped the girls off at around 1:35. I watched Libby walk away after telling her I loved her.
135.
She set it back, and I made sure they both had sweatshirts. So they continued to walk, and I drove away. After I dropped them off, I called Chase and told him that I was on my way.
Kelsi continues, I watched Libby walk away after telling her I loved her. On the surface, it's tender, but zoom in on the phrase after telling her. That small word after creates yet another gap. It subtly obscures a moment between speaking and watching, a moment that likely held something more. Not just affection, but a warning. It's probable that Kelsi tried one last time to dissuade Libby from going to meet Anthony's shots. The omission is structural.
Remember the stories? Do you guys remember the stories about a yelling screaming match at the drop-off? Am I the only one? Let's listen to this piece with that in mind, okay?
Gap. It subtly obscures a moment between speaking and watching, a moment that likely held something more. Not just affection, but a warning. It's probable that Kelsi tried one last time to dissuade Libby from going to meet Anthony Schatz. The omission is structural, not accidental. It conceals a final attempt and a final rejection. She said it back, a phrase meant to reassure, but it doesn't. The verb said is emotionally neutral or even cold. It's not told, which signals emotional confidence. It reads less like a heartfelt moment and more like Kelsi trying to convince herself, after the fact, that there was still peace between them. It's possible Libby said it sarcastically, dismissively, or out of obligation. Words spoken but not felt. That detail would haunt a sister forever. Then the sentence heard around the world. I made sure they both had sweatshirts. This is one of the few clean lines in her narrative. Direct, specific, and yes, truthful. And yet, even here, there's something quietly revealing. She doesn't say, I gave them sweatshirts, or they took mine. She says she made sure they had them. It's protective, mothering, but it's also a window into the moment because it suggests that the sweatshirts weren't Kelsi's greatest concern at that moment. She was focused on logistics, yes, but likely in the middle of a far more heated and urgent discussion. She may have offered hers, they may have even agreed to take hers, and in the tension of that exchange, she may not have realized that they actually took their own sweatshirts. Why is that so important? Because it points to conflict, not coordination. Kelsi's priority wasn't just the weather. The conflict came from a far deeper fear, where they were going and why. Remember Kelsi's language. Libby was becoming a woman. Kelsi's fear here was likely not of death itself, but rather, how shall I put this, bringing forth new life. Sometimes the worst case is so inconceivable that it's not even the greatest consideration in that moment. To those of you who saw deception here, who assumed malicious intent, know that deception itself is not malicious. Malintent is malicious. Deception is not representing reality as it was. Sometimes people use deception to hide nefarious intent, but sometimes it's simply to preserve a veil of innocence that maybe wasn't really there, not out of hate, but out of love. So they continued to walk and I drove away. This sentence on its own is devastating. The verb continued is passive, resigned. It shows that she was already feeling helpless. In her mind, Kelsi had tried to change Libby's path, but changing someone else's path is not a child's game. Without the force of will that comes from age and experience, Kelsi was outside of her depth here. So she watched, hoping they might change their minds and turn back. But of course they didn't. The act of driving away was not just physical, it was symbolic. It was the moment Kelsi abdicated control and placed her trust in the belief that the worst would never actually happen. That same illusion that most people live by their whole lives until one day they no longer can. After I dropped them off, I called Chase and told him I was on my way. Here, Abby and Libby are no longer in Kelsi's presence, and we return to emotional safety. The relationship with Chase is routine, familiar, even exciting. Kelsi uses told again, which carries positive emotional connotation. Unlike the emotionally neutral said used earlier when describing Libby, this contrast is telling. Kelsi is relaxed here, comfortable. It marks a psychological boundary between before the trauma and after, between the moment she tried to stop something hypothetical and the moment she succumbed to the pressure and gave up, thinking as anyone would, surely everything will be fine. But we get to live in Kelsi's future, not her present. As we know, everything would not be fine. And now every word she speaks about that day carries two weights, the one she's willing to say and the one she's trying not to. Now let's continue.
Chase left a little bit before I did. He had to work at 4 and I was working at 4:30. So there was a little bit of a gap. And so I had a little time to sit down and watch a movie with his dad and hang out until it was my turn. Around 4:12, I got a couple calls from my grandma.
At first glance, this is a Monday.
Listen, we all know that that little segment made no sense whatsoever. Zero logic to what she just described. That has always been a sticking point in this story, that bothersome, every telling it never makes sense, you know.
Mundane memory. Two young people heading to work, killing time. But let's look deeper. Point one, Chase left a little bit before I did. The word left usually means the person is running late. And in this case, when going to work, that probably is the case. Now, here's where it gets interesting. She says before, but she completely skips what happened before Chase left. That's a narrative gap. In deception detection, omission is often more telling and more interesting than what's included. What were they doing? And why doesn't she want to explain what they were doing? Next, we see what's called an alibi frame. She's heavily timestamping events, but the times are not related to the crime. Chase left at 4. I worked at 4:30. Grandma called at 4:12, but none of these directly overlap with the time of the incident. Remember, the murders began at about 3:07. 3:15, something like that. Time stamping is subconscious and based around what's weighing on your mind in that moment. In this case, the murders are not yet known to Kelsi, and the biggest problem she is facing is getting caught with her boyfriend. Now, if you're thinking that maybe the actual murders happened around the time that she's stamping, that's not the way that people stamp. People stamp based around when the incident began, when it ended, and then a substantial impact point in the middle. For Kelsi, that is clearly from when Chase was supposed to leave until she was supposed to leave, and then when her grandma called at that point in the middle. So if the timestamps were in regard to the murder, there would be a stamp that was around that 3:07 time.
I didn't hear my phone go off the first time, so the second time it went off, I knew something must have been wrong because my grandma never calls multiple times unless she really needs something, especially if she knows that I have to go to work that day. So
I didn't hear it the first time, so when I heard it the second time, I knew I had to pick up.
I picked up my phone and I called my grandma back. And the first thing she said was, "Have you heard from Libby?"
Now, we also have so, which is over-explaining at the time of the, let's just call it fooling around for now. Moving on. At a glance, this sounds like standard recollection, a missed call, a callback, and rising concern. But when deconstructed through the lens of deception analysis, the language unravels into something more complex, a carefully managed memory, shaped as much by what's said as by what's strategically withheld. First, I didn't hear my phone go off the first time. This is a negative statement, and in verbal forensics, that's a red flag. Negation doesn't just convey absence, it's a defensive frame, primed not to recount truth, but to preempt guilt. More importantly, it's followed by an explanatory clause. So the second time it went off, I knew something must have been wrong. This negative plus an explanatory phrase pattern is a classic linguistic marker of deception. It suggests that the speaker isn't simply recalling, they're justifying. Kelsi almost certainly did register the first call. She likely chose not to answer, possibly due to fooling around with Chase. But she can't say that directly, so the structure compensates.
All right. Let me stop him here. This is where I don't necessarily agree with Sergio, okay? So let me just put a pin in that here so that as it goes forward, you can know that I'm not really on the same page with him here. Sergio seems to make this all about fooling around, you know. He tends to put this whole deception, this whole zone of deception here in this storytelling or this narrative. As he said earlier, this is creating a narrative, okay? He tends to attribute this creation of this point in the narrative centered around Netflix and chill, which I don't buy it, okay? I don't buy it. I don't necessarily relegate it to the most innocent explanation. So it's part of my problem with his conclusion here, but let me just put that caveat out there and then let him continue, and we'll follow up on it later. Okay. Let's see.
Denial, then rationalization. Second, we see logical inconsistency. The second time, how would she know it was the second time unless the first time made some sort of impression on her? If she truly didn't hear the phone the first time, there would be no basis for recognizing the second call as anything unusual. The awareness of the second call being significant, paired with the claim of not hearing the first, reveals a structural contradiction. It's not just flawed logic, it's the mind subconsciously revealing that the first call did register even if her mind was elsewhere. So I picked up my phone. Another "so" appears here. Once again, it's an explanatory statement, a linguistic signal of discomfort or sensitivity. Instead of simply saying, "I called her back," Kelsi feels the need to explain why. This over-justification points to emotional weight. She's not just recounting, she's mitigating the tension of that moment. The first thing she said was, "Have you heard from Libby?" Here, we get the clearest tonal shift. The word "said" as opposed to "told" has subtle negative connotations. Where "told" conveys structure and clarity, "said" is neutral, often carrying the undertone of emotional dissonance or discomfort. It reflects the mood of the conversation. This wasn't a warm, composed check-in. It was a cold opening into dread. This isn't just a story of missed calls and concerned relatives. It's the psychological outline of a turning point, the exact moment when Kelsi's world began to tip. Her language betrays what her memory tries to hide. She likely heard or noticed the first call. She chose not to answer, caught in a moment of personal conflict. The second call forced her into reality, and she scrambled to reframe her decision as benign. Her grandmother's opening question was a line drawn in the sand. From that moment on, there would be no more delay, no more avoiding what was coming. Kelsi's emotional calculus shifted in real time, love, loyalty, and fear colliding. So let's continue.
And that was the hardest moment, I think, of that particular day. After we heard, I called my work and told them I was going to help search for my sister. I got in my car and drove to Highbridge. At the moment, I called my grandma and told her I was on my way. I could hear the scaredness in her voice, the amount of hurt that she was feeling just knowing that something was wrong.
The day she got the news was, in her words, the hardest moment. Or at least that's how she framed it. But even as she said it, she qualified the statement, "I think." That subtle emotional distancing stands out. People rarely insert emotion where they're recalling real trauma. They feel it, they relive it, but they discuss it after the incident, not in mid-story. That kind of emotional packaging often signals performance, not memory. Still, there may have been genuine conflict, especially if she'd been struggling with the decision to let Libby and Abby go to the bridge in the first place. Real guilt and selective honesty often coexist. She described what happened next, calling her workplace, deciding to join the search, and getting in her car to drive to Highbridge. On the way, she phoned her grandmother, choosing to emphasize the scaredness in her grandmother's voice. Again, it was a curiously emotional note, as if she needed the listener to believe what she was feeling. But underneath the surface of that account, something was missing, specifically the time after they heard the news. There's a gap, an absence where key events should be. That missing block becomes even more suspicious when you realize it's tied to the word "we." She doesn't say "I heard," she says "we heard." But her boyfriend Chase was supposed to be at work at that time. Also, remember, he left late and in a hurry. Remember, he left, not right as he was supposed to, as portrayed. More suspicious when you realize it's tied to the word "we." She doesn't say "I heard," she says "we heard." But
See, it's an important point here that he just glosses over. Let's back it up a little.
in her grandmother's voice. Again, it was a curiously emotional note, as if she needed the listener to believe what she was feeling. But underneath the surface of that account, something was missing, specifically the time after they heard the news. There's a gap, an absence where key events should be. That missing block becomes even more suspicious when you realize it's tied to the word "we." She doesn't say "I heard," she says "we heard." But her boyfriend Chase was supposed to be at work at that time. Also, remember, he left late and in a hurry. Remember, he left, not right as he was supposed to, as portrayed. Pronouns are objective, and they'll betray you. That slip exposes something. Chase wasn't at work. They were together doing something that had to be hidden. And whatever that was, it couldn't withstand scrutiny. Her language gives away more, though. She uses the word "told" twice, once for calling her work, once for speaking to her grandmother. Told carries a sense of decisiveness and authority. It's the confident version of said, which is softer and more uncertain. The choice of told suggests that in that moment, she wasn't overcome with worry. That tells us something crucial. She didn't believe Abby was in real danger, not yet. If she still thought Abby was alive at that point, it's also hard to believe she was involved in her death. The story she tells and the way she tells it is stitched with subtle fractures, gaps in time, misaligned pronouns, emotion where there should be memory, certainty where there should be fear. All of it forms a pattern, not of guilt necessarily, but of concealment. Something was happening behind the scenes that wasn't about murder, but rather the hidden we.
No, Sergio. How do you know? How do you know, Sergio? You're drawing conclusions. You don't know it was sexual. They could have been doing something else they wanted to hide. Yeah? So, sorry, this is where I sort of leave room for other explanations.
She said it started to fractures, gaps in time, misaligned pronouns, emotion where there should be memory, certainty where there should be fear. All of it forms a pattern, not of guilt necessarily, but of concealment. Something was happening behind the scenes that wasn't about murder, but rather the hidden we. She said it started to hit her.
And that's kind of when I knew, like, there's something happening. Like, I don't know where the girls are. I don't know where Libby is. I haven't heard from her. I was confused. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to say to my family.
And that's kind of when I knew, like, there's something happening. But even in that moment of supposed realization, the language faltered.
Boy, look at this clusterfuck of a paragraph here, guys. This is another one of those paragraphs with zero logic. It's just all scatterbrained. It means it's just word salad. Okay, this is word salad, and that's kind of when I knew, like, there's something happening. Like, I don't know where the girls are. Like, I don't know where Libby is. I haven't heard from her. Was confused. I don't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to say to my family. Word salad, bullshit. Okay, let me back it up.
There's something happening. Like, I don't know where the girls are. I don't know where Libby is. I haven't heard from her. I was confused. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to say to my family.
And that's kind of when I knew, like, there's something happening. But even in that moment of supposed realization, the language faltered. Words like kind of and like crept in, hedging terms. They weren't casual speech patterns. They were subtle reductions of commitment. This wasn't when she knew. It was when she wanted others to believe she started to worry. The truth is, Kelsi likely didn't suspect anything terrible had happened yet. Beneath the surface of her statement is a quieter, more plausible story. One where she thought Libby was off with Anthony's shots, maybe sneaking away to make out under the bridge, doing something.
This is where I disagree with him as well. The excuse making, I don't know about that. I don't know. It could be after. In other words, it's just we know in space and time, it's not authentic. So she's either predicating or she's coming up after. But let me back it up and let him speak.
Altered. Words like kind of and like crept in, hedging terms. They weren't casual speech patterns. They were subtle reductions of commitment. This wasn't when she knew. It was when she wanted others to believe she started to worry. The truth is, Kelsi likely didn't suspect anything terrible had happened yet. Beneath the surface of her statement is a quieter, more plausible story. One where she thought Libby was off with Anthony's shots, maybe sneaking away to make out under the bridge, doing something she wasn't supposed to be doing, but not something life-threatening. Kelsi's concern at this point was likely not fear for Libby's safety. It was embarrassment and the fear of getting caught helping her sister to establish this secret rendezvous. Let's continue with the story. She described herself as confused, unsure. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to say to my family. A spiral of negative statements, but buried in that last line is something more, a tacit admission. I didn't know what to say to my family. Doesn't just express helplessness. It suggests withheld truth. Kelsi likely knew that Libby had gone to meet someone, Anthony Schatz, and she hadn't told anyone. She wasn't necessarily trying to cover up a crime at that point. She probably didn't think anything bad had happened. More likely, she was trying to avoid getting Libby in trouble and maybe avoid getting herself in some trouble too, for facilitating the meetup or at least turning a blind eye to it. So she stood there, caught between the story she was telling and the truth she was withholding, not because she was guilty of something worse, but because she didn't yet understand the gravity of what was unfolding. Let's move along.
After I had told my grandma I was on my way, I arrived at the bridge. It was probably around 4:30, I'm assuming, based on when I got the phone call. We were gonna go to the trails and look and see if we could find the girls ourselves. Like, our main thought was they must have fallen, dropped a phone. Maybe they got lost in the woods. They wandered off a little too far and couldn't find their way back. So at that time, me and my uncle crossed the bridge. We got down to the private drive and we were walking around, yelling their names, trying to find out where they might be, hoping that if they had gotten hurt, they would just yell back and say, "Hey, we're over here, can you help us?" At that point, we hadn't heard anything, so we headed back.
She said that after telling her grandmother she was on the way, she arrived at the bridge, probably around 4:30 p.m., tying the statement loosely to the timing of a phone call. But the word after was quietly flagging another gap. That moment between telling her grandmother and arriving likely involved a personal debate. Whether or not to reveal the real reason Libby had gone out that day, whether to admit that she knew Libby was meeting someone named Anthony Schatz, weighing the gravity of the situation, which she deemed as a sister in the throes of romance, to the consequences of a potential admission to the withheld information that an unknown person from the internet was potentially involved. Once she described arriving, her tone shifted. The sequence of events that followed was grounded, anchored in tangible memory. She and her uncle crossed the bridge, went down to the private drive, called out the girls' names. They imagined plausible scenarios. The girls had fallen, dropped a phone, wandered too far. But then the narrative drifted again. At that point, she said, we hadn't heard anything, so we headed back. On the surface, it sounds logical, but that phrasing, "at that point," is another gap, a curtain pulled over an undefined stretch of time. Something happened between searching and turning back, something important. And then there's the structure of the sentence itself. A negative statement, "we hadn't heard anything," followed immediately by an explanation, "so we headed back." That pairing, negation followed by rationale, is a classic marker of concealed information. Taken together, these linguistic patterns suggest a quiet pivot in the story. The physical search may have been real, but the decision to turn back wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. The omission points to an unseen event, something they encountered, realized, or decided, not explained to us, but powerful enough to change their course of action.
That's a very important point that I have not heard anyone who viewed this video yet talk about, but I've talked about it behind the scenes with my friends. Let's reiterate what he just said there.
Structure of the sentence itself. A negative statement, "we hadn't heard anything," followed immediately by an explanation, "so we headed back." That pairing, negation followed by rationale, is a classic marker of concealed information. Taken together, these linguistic patterns suggest a quiet pivot in the story. The physical search may have been real, but the decision to turn back wasn't as straightforward as it seemed.
What did he just say?
Structure of the sentence itself. A negative statement, "we hadn't heard anything," followed immediately by an explanation, "so we headed back." That pairing, negation followed by rationale, is a classic marker of concealed information. Taken together, these linguistic patterns suggest a quiet pivot in the story. The physical search may have been real, but the decision to turn back wasn't as straightforward as it seemed.
That means there's a lie. There's a lie there. So why do you go out there, allegedly, walk across the bridge, and suddenly skedaddle and twist the reasoning in your explanation?
The omission points to an unseen event, something they encountered, realized, or decided, not explained to us, but powerful enough to change their course of action. Was it at that point that Kelsi may have mentioned something about there being another person involved, Anthony Schatz? That's just me speculating, but there is definitely missing time there. Whatever it was, it pushed them away from the woods and towards their next move, calling the police. Of hidden admission.
Sorry, I jumped around. That was such an important point. Listen to it again. Whatever it was pulled them away from the woods, right to calling the police. Right? Let's find that spot again. I goofed around and I hit the wrong spot. Here, so let's try it.
Together, these linguistic patterns suggest a quiet pivot in the story. The physical search may have been real, but the decision to turn back wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. The omission points to an unseen event, something they encountered, realized, or decided, not explained to us, but powerful enough to change their course of action. Was it at that point that Kelsi may have mentioned something about there being another person involved, Anthony's shots? That's just me speculating, but
Well, maybe Cody should tell. Cody, Derek, the Shack. Remember, what are the three unmentionables?
there is definitely missing time there. Whatever it was, it pushed them away from the woods and towards their next move, calling the police. So what happened? I don't know. But let's move on.
We decided that it was time that we got a hold of the police. It was starting to get dark. We knew that they needed help. Every possible situation was going through our brains, and we never thought we would end up with the outcome we did. We got a hold of the police. Finally, my grandparents went to the police station.
13. She said they decided it was time to contact the police. It was starting to get dark, she explained. The missing time was the missing search. As the darkness would inevitably end the search, the word never replaces a more honest didn't, which wouldn't have allowed room for doubt or fear. Never is absolute, and absolutes are rarely truthful. It's a way to deny that the possibility of death had even crossed their minds. But of course, that's hard to believe. By this point, the girls were truly missing. It wasn't just a delay or running off with a boy. If Kelsi was being honest with herself, she had almost certainly started to fear the worst. And it's possible that her uncle might have also at this point. Let's continue with the story. 14.
Knowing the area, I knew areas that the girls would have went if they were going there willingly. So going around those areas, I was able to help them go to spots that I knew Libby would have been if she wanted.
She explained that knowing the area, she had a sense of where the girls might have gone.
That makes absolutely no sense to me either. That was a whole bunch of more gobbledygook. Let's listen to that again. Just what the fuck is? I don't even. Can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Don't I have a thing to say?
As an expert at being Mickey Mouse, yeah, I can say seriously, yeah. Yeah, you're right, Rick. This is some Mickey Mouse bullshit. Thanks, Mickey. Bruh.
Would have went if they were going there willingly. So going around those areas, I was able to help them go to spots that I knew Libby would have been if she wanted.
She explained that knowing the area, she had a sense of where the girls might have gone if they were going there willingly. It seems like a casual qualifier, but that one word, willingly, is a fracture in the timeline. It's not the kind of thought you have in the moment unless something darker is already on your mind. That's not how people think during.
Good point. Good point. So back to that gobbledygook sentence. I know I made it funny with the little quote, but let's do that again.
Point. Let's continue with the story. 14.
Knowing the area, I knew areas that the girls would have went if they were going there willingly. So going around those areas, I was able to help them go to spots that I knew Libby would have been if she wanted.
She explained that knowing the area, she had a sense of where the girls might have gone if they were going there willingly. It seems like a casual qualifier, but that one word, willingly, is a fracture in the timeline. It's not the kind of thought you have in the moment unless something darker is already on your mind. That's not how people think during a simple search. That's how people think when they're already aware there was another person involved. By inserting that word, Kelsi unwittingly revealed a split in her awareness. She wasn't just looking for the girls, she was already calculating the possibility that Libby hadn't gone there by choice. But she doesn't say it directly. She uses the conditional to keep it at arm's length, making it seem like she was still holding on to hope, when in truth, the thought of coercion had already entered her mind.
She already knew.
Then she mentioned the places she guided the others to search. Places where she knew Libby would have been if she wanted to be there. What she's describing, carefully and without naming it, are the kinds of spots teenagers sneak off to. Quiet, hidden, semi-private, make-out points. That detail suggests Kelsi had reason to believe Libby had arranged to meet someone like Anthony Schatz. At that stage, Kelsi likely still thought this was a situation she could manage. Maybe Libby was just being reckless. Maybe she was hiding with a boy. But beneath that possibility was a deeper one she couldn't bring herself to say aloud yet, that Libby hadn't gone willingly, and that something was already terribly wrong. The language dances around that fear, avoiding it with conditionals and vague geography, but it's there in what she says, and more clearly in what she tries not to. And so, we move on.
To be there. Soon after that, search party started to form of people in the community. People were coming from all over to help us. They were coming from different cities. They were from our community. There were people going out there from other states, I believe. There were just people from all over there searching. Later on that evening, I believe around midnight, the search was called off for whatever reason. They said it was because of the safety. The terrain was really rough and rugged, and they just didn't want people to get hurt. They didn't want to have to put their resources into helping other people when we needed to find the girls. That was really defeating, knowing that the search was called off. I went home to try to sleep, and I didn't get in.
15. The way she describes the formation of the search party is also telling. Started to form, not formed. There's a subtle stall there, a suggestion that the momentum never quite reached its full potential. Then, later on that evening, she jumps ahead, another time gap. That bridge between effort and outcome is left unexplored. And in that space lies the real tension, the growing friction between Kelsi and the authorities. Around midnight, she says the search was called off. For whatever reason, it's a phrase loaded with disbelief. She doesn't accept the explanation she was given. The official line was about safety. The terrain was too rugged, the risk too high. But the way she recounts it, the rationale feels hollow. She recites it with detachment, with a string of negative and explanatory statements that betray her real belief, that the police weren't doing their best. Maybe that she wasn't actually telling them the whole truth.
He went out with a bang on that one, though. I got to give him the credit for that one. Yeah. All right. Where's the other one? Let's see. The other one is geez. Just a moment. Let's see. Have to pull it up. Have to clear this out because it was glitching on me. Come on. All right, here we go. Come on, baby. Let's find it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm Sergio Denaro. Today I am doing episode 2 of the Kelsi German case in the DELPHI murders. Now the first episode I did in a more narrative style. I got a lot of feedback, and what I got from that was that it was a little bit harder for you to tell exactly what my analysis was and where I was getting certain information from. So I'm going to finish recording my analysis on Kelsi German in my older technique, where I'm going to look at my computer screen and I'm going to go through the indicators and tell you what I see from each indicator individually. Then at the end of the video, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave comments and tell me which style you like better. I think there's something to be said for the narrative version. I think that's more entertaining, and my entire analysis is in there. But if you really want to know how did I get to each individual point, then I think you're probably going to like the second half a little better. But anyways, let's dive back into Kelsi German's statement here. At the point where we left off, Kelsi was talking about the search that the police department was beginning to coordinate and all the volunteers that were coming together. Now she's going to explain why the search was called off and how she feels about that.
I believe around midnight, the search was called off for whatever reason. They said it was because of the safety. The terrain was really rough and rugged, and they just didn't want people to get hurt. They didn't want to have to put their resources into helping other people when we needed to find the girls. That was really defeating, knowing that the search was called off. I went home to try to sleep, and I didn't get any.
She says they said it was because of the safety. The terrain was really rough and rugged, and they just didn't want people to get hurt. Notice she says the word said, which is the more toned down. It's the more negative version, which means she's not happy to hear this information. And then because is an explanatory statement. They said it was because of the safety. So that's a sensitive issue for her. The word just means that there's something else other than people not getting hurt. That's the reason why they didn't want people to continue looking overnight. Then she goes on to say they didn't want to have to put their resources into helping other people when we needed to find the girls. Now there's a couple of things here. She says the girls. She's always referred to Libby and Abby as the girls. That's very important for us to note because you will almost always see a change in language from the killer regarding the victims. Before the victims are killed, the killer sees them a certain way. After the murders, the killer is going to see the victim in a different way. Either they become more of a liability because now they're endangering the freedom of the killer now that they're dead and the murder's been committed, or they were such a stress on the murderer before they were killed, and then the murderer feels much better after they've been killed. That change in reality for the killer leads to a change of language. And that usually comes across as a difference in what the killer calls them or the verbiage that they use to describe the victim. In this case, our subject is Kelsi German, and she always refers to Abby and Libby as the girls. Anytime that she separates that and doesn't call them the girls, calls them Abby and Libby, that might seem like a small change, but verbally, that's very significant. We want to look for that. At this point, all I'm saying is that the verbiage hasn't changed. She's still calling them the girls. All right, the next thing that I want to know here is the word just. Just means that there is something being removed. They just didn't want people to get hurt. The correct way to say that is they didn't want people to get hurt. To add in extra unnecessary verbiage means that your brain is thinking about something specifically that's causing it to add the word just, which means that there's more than one reason. But the subject doesn't want to say the reason, so they remove the real reason, and then they add the word just. It was just because they didn't want to have to put in the extra resources. What that tells me is that there was another reason, and in this case, we know that Kelsi was withholding information from the police at this point. She hadn't told them that she knew that there was another random man from the internet, Anthony Schatz, who was meeting the girls, who was probably involved in their disappearance. So she removed that bit of information. She says the police just didn't want people to get hurt. The police also didn't know that there was a greater reason why they should keep looking. Kelsi at this point has the belief that the girls aren't just lost. They're actually being detained or something happened to them because of this man from the internet. And the police don't have that information. So the police don't have that same sense of urgency that Kelsi does in this moment. If you've been following my analysis up to this point, and I know that the narrative from part one was a little bit different, but just to recap here, Kelsi, in my opinion, based on her verbiage, Kelsi knew that Abby and Libby were going to meet this random stranger from the internet, Anthony Schatz. And she hasn't told anybody about that yet. Now, in my analysis here, you're probably understanding what I'm getting at here is that Kelsi didn't murder the girls. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying Kelsi is completely innocent of everything. I'm saying that this is reality, and in reality, everybody plays a certain role in this story. What we want to find out is what is the role that Kelsi actually played. My goal is not to villainize her because of the role that she played. I don't villainize people, and I don't anoint sainthood to people either. What's important here is finding out what actually happened. Just because somebody is not the killer doesn't mean they didn't make mistakes. In fact, it doesn't mean that the role that they played is completely innocent. Now, in this situation, Kelsi hasn't told the police information. This is my opinion, of course, which is why you get this verbiage here, which is why they called off the search. Now, had the girls been murdered at, say, 5 o'clock in the morning, then I would say that Kelsi's selfish reasons of not wanting to get in trouble and not wanting people to know that she knew that they were meeting someone and she didn't tell anybody about it, then that would have played a role. But because at this point, based on the forensic evidence, it's believed that Abby and Libby had already been killed at this point, this becomes irrelevant information. It doesn't change the intent of Kelsi to not tell the police that they were meeting somebody, but it doesn't end up having anything to do with what happened to the girls. So now that we're clear on that, we'll continue here. Next, she says, that was really defeating knowing that the search was called off. That's important verbiage there. Defeating is a weird way of saying that. And by weird, I mean, you just don't hear that a lot, which means Kelsi is using that word and she's assigning a certain meaning to it. And we need to figure out what exactly she means by that. She says it a couple more times later. So we're going to compare those statements later once we've seen how she uses that. But notice here, she says, that was really defeating. She doesn't say I was defeated. She's not placing blame on herself at this point. She's placing blame on the police. And notice the police are making decisions based on having a lack of information at this point because of the information Kelsi hasn't told them. So then she says, I went home to try and sleep and I didn't get any. We don't get a whole lot from that. I didn't is a negative statement, but I didn't. Whenever you put I in front of didn't, there's personal commitment there, and likely she really didn't sleep that night. All right, let's look at the next section of her statement here.
We got up the next morning and we headed out to look again. We were all put into groups, and then I was put into the group that actually got to cross the bridge, and the others stayed behind to look on the wooded area that's over on the other side.
She says, we got up the next morning and we headed out to look again. We were all put into groups, and then I was put into the group that actually got to cross the bridge, and the others stayed behind to look on the wooded area that's over on the other side. So the only thing that we really get from this statement here is she uses the word we a lot, which means she does feel connected to this group. And then she stumbles when she gets to the wooded area.
Wooded area.
There's something about the wooded area that's problematic for her.
Of course.
I don't know what it is because nobody's asking her questions about that. So I don't get any extra information. The only information I get is that that's a sensitive area. Literally, that's a sensitive area of territory, of terrain. The wooded area. Anytime people are repeating words, it means that there's more going on in their mind. And their mind has stopped thinking about the words and is thinking about what is actually happening there, and the words start to stumble. That's a sensitive area, and I don't know why. All right, let's look at the next section here.
We're looking underneath the bridge, and as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up the hill that they'd found a shoe. And knowing that I dropped the girls off and I remembered what they were wearing, I knew exactly what shoes my sister and Abby were both wearing. So as soon as they yelled up what type of shoe it was, I knew exactly whose it was.
So she says, and we were looking underneath the bridge, and as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up the hill that they'd found a shoe. Okay, that is just narrative information there. There's nothing deceptive. She says we, so she's still committed and feels part of this group. Then she says, and knowing that I dropped the girls off and remembered what they were wearing, I knew exactly what shoes my sister and Abby were both wearing. Okay, so we have a couple of issues with this statement here. She says, knowing that I dropped the girls off. That is the wrong way of saying that. Anytime somebody says they know something happened, it means that that area is very sensitive.
Yeah, I noticed that too. This is the thing with Sergio. I don't agree with his conclusions a lot of times about whys, but I agree often with his interpretation of the linguistic side of this. So I just thought that was, I've always felt that those key terms she uses, like defeating, that was so defeating, and knowing that, and these sorts of things, they're key indicators. Let me back it up because I can stop talking and just let him talk. Let's see.
That is the wrong way of saying that. Anytime somebody says they know something happened, it means that that area is very sensitive, because knowing what you're saying goes without saying. Anybody who's telling you something that they did knows that they did what they did. And so to have to say that she knows that means that there's something sensitive about when she dropped the girls off. And we'll understand that in just a second. Then she says, I remembered what they were wearing. Now this section here actually uses some pitch inflection. So let's play that one more time here.
And I remembered what they were wearing.
All right. Did you hear that she says, I remembered what they were wearing? It went up. And when you get that inflection in the pitch, that is almost always a deceptive statement. What we get from this is when she says, I remembered, it means she doesn't remember. So I remembered now becomes a deception tag because she uses that word to emphasize that she doesn't remember something. We have sensitivity around knowing that she dropped the girls off, and then now she says that she remembered something that she doesn't remember. And it's what they were wearing. Okay, let's.
Key. Now listen, that was key. Please. Hear what he said. Okay? Please hear what he said. Let's back that up. That was major, all right?
She doesn't remember.
Regarding the clothes that they are wearing.
So I remembered now becomes a deception tag because she uses that word to emphasize that she doesn't remember something. We have sensitivity around knowing that she dropped the girls off, and then now she says that she remembered something that she doesn't remember. And it's what they were wearing.
So why would you say you remember them wearing something, what they're wearing, and that not be what you remember they were wearing?
Okay, let's continue on. But it's important that you understand the analysis here. She doesn't remember what they were wearing. That's all that she's saying at this point. Now, of course, you're going to ask the question, why is she telling you that she remembers what they were wearing if she doesn't remember what they were wearing? We'll figure that out in just a second here. So then she says, I knew exactly what shoes my sister and Abby were both wearing. Okay, that tells you very specifically that she doesn't know that based on the sentence before. So as soon as they yelled up what type of shoe it was, I knew exactly whose it was. The so is an indicator of sensitivity for what she's about to say. She's over-explaining. And then the last part of this is said truthfully. As soon as they yelled up what type of shoe it was, I knew exactly whose it was. That part is truthful. So how do we make sense out of all of this? Why the deception if in the end what she's telling you is truthful? And the answer is she wants to come across as being in charge, the expert. She wants people to look to her for information. She wants to feel important there. And that's a very distinct personality type. In the interrogation booth, you want to notice that when some
See, I don't necessarily agree with him on this point either. This is another place where we diverge in our conclusions. So this is his conclusion that she wants to be seen as smart and knowledgeable and all that. It's not my conclusion.
Somebody wants to be the person who is in charge, who knows the information, who is figuring things out. Some people, that's important to them, that sense of authority. And that is important to Kelsi. That is all this tells us. Let's think about what she said for a minute. Sisters, now this is just based on my own personal experience with stories that I've heard about my wife's sisters. Sisters usually know their other sisters' wardrobes inside and out, especially when they're close in age or size, because they're always stealing each other's clothing. So I have no doubt that Kelsi, the minute that she saw or heard the description of Libby's shoe, knew that that was her shoe. She's probably seen that shoe 500 times. Now, that doesn't mean that she knew that she was wearing those shoes when she got out of the car. I'm saying when your sister gets out of the car and you see them walking away, you may notice their clothing. In here, Kelsi didn't, which is not criminal. It doesn't say anything about malicious intent here. What it says is that she didn't notice that what her sister was wearing. Now, that doesn't mean that given the description of the shoe or seeing the shoe, that she's not going to recognize it. Of course, she's going to recognize it instantly. What this tells you is something about Kelsi's personality. It doesn't tell you about her intent to harm Libby. What it tells you is that she wanted to play a role in finding Libby.
It wasn't long after they told us that they'd found the shoe that a searcher found the bodies of the girls. I was totally defeated.
Next, Kelsi says, it wasn't long after they told us. Okay, so wasn't is a negative statement, but it's not connected to an explanatory statement, so it's not problematic. It wasn't long after. After is missing time, so we got to figure out what she removed here. And then she says told. Told is the more positive way of saying something, the more assertive way. So she says it wasn't long after they told us that they'd found the shoe. So she's talking about the shoe here. The word told, it tells me that Kelsi actually felt positive about finding the shoe. So while she's been thinking that the worst could possibly have happened, she's still hoping to find the girls alive here. Now, it wasn't long after they told us. So the word after here tells me that there's something that's cut out here. And I remember hearing that Kelsi wasn't allowed to see the girls right away. So there was some conflict there where she wanted to go and she wasn't allowed to go. So that's why you have the word after. That's the information that is sensitive to her that gets cut out. And then she says that a searcher found the bodies of the girls. So at this point, the bodies means that the girls are dead. And in Kelsi's verbiage, we do not see a change of language. The girls were the girls before they were murdered, and they were the girls after they were murdered. This tells me that Kelsi can't be the one who murdered them or planned on murdering them or literally had anything to do with their murders. Because even if you're involved in planning the murders, but you didn't do it, you are still going to see a change of language because of the change of emotion that goes along with it. Now, I can visualize your comments already. There's no change of emotion after they're dead. No, of course there's a change of emotion, but there's not a change in the way that she views her sister and Abby, because she loved her sister. She felt a connection to her. She wanted to be looked up to by her sister. And once her sister died, none of that changed. The way that she felt about her, the fact that she loved her, that she wanted to be her protector, that she wanted to be the one that is looked up to. Now, notice that's a theme here. We've seen that through this entire statement.
No. I must disagree. Sergio has seen that. I'm not seeing it. But I'll let him go.
Not only the part where she was sensitive about what they were wearing. Kelsi, that's part of her personality. She wants to be looked up to and she wants to be admired. That's the word I was looking for there. She wants to be admired by people. And the fact that the language doesn't change around the girls being dead means that Kelsi could not have had anything to do with this. And then she says, I was totally defeated. Now we have a change from that was defeating to I was totally defeated. That is the change of language that's important here, because she was personally invested in finding the girls and being the one who rescues them. She wants to be that person, the one that rescues them. And now she says, I was totally defeated, because at this point, she can't rescue them. So the language, her verbiage is very clear here. All right, we'll continue on.
That morning, I had actually packed a bag with a granola bars and a blanket in them, hoping that the girls would need them. They would be so happy to have a granola bar after being outside all night.
She says, that morning I had actually packed a bag with a granola bars and a blanket, and then hoping that the girls would need them. They would be so happy to have a granola bar after being outside all night. The only indicator of sensitivity in here is the word after, missing time. She says, after being outside all night. The time that she's chunking out is them being alone in the forest overnight, the difficulty that would bring them. So that is explained there. Now, keep in mind that when you see a missing time statement, you're looking for the chunk of time that has been removed to be explained. If somebody says, I went to the movies and
I mean, Sergio, here's the thing. There's already, are we on about the sixth, seventh chunk of time that is missing here? And we're only an hour in. I mean, how many chunks of time in a narrative can be missing before the narrative doesn't make sense anymore?
After the movie, they're saying after, but they have removed a chunk of time and they've told you the chunk of time that they've removed. If somebody says, I went to church and then after the service, that is the correct way of saying that. If somebody says, I went to a football game and then after the game, they're telling you they went to the game and then they're telling you that what I did there is the same as what everybody else does. And then the after is that 3-hour chunk of time that's removed. Here she says, after being outside all night. So she tells you the part that's removed. It only is problematic and indicates conflict if they don't explain the part of the piece of time that they have removed, because after always means that time was removed. Okay, now we're going to look at the next sentence here.
So after that, the experience is very blurry. I don't remember much up until the funeral, to be honest.
She says, so is a sensitive state.
Bullshit.
Look at the next sentence here.
So after that, the experience is very blurry. I don't remember much up until the funeral, to be
that's removed. Here she says, after being outside all night. So she tells you the part that's removed. It only is problematic and indicates conflict if they don't explain the part of the piece of time that they have removed, because after always means that time was removed. Okay, now we're going to look at the next sentence here.
So after that, the experience is very blurry. I don't remember much up until the funeral, to be
Bullshit.
honest.
She says, so is a sensitive statement. Then she tells you, after that, the experience is very blurry. To say that it's blurry sounds like she's trying to gloss over information there. And then she says, to be honest, which can either be deceptive or truthful. It can mean that she's embarrassed about not having very good memory after that. The factor that is going to explain what this means to us requires that we have some knowledge about trauma, about what happens after an event like that. And it turns out what she's saying here is pretty common. After a traumatic event like the murder of siblings, this is something that you usually see from somebody who was not involved in the murder. The interesting thing is that if you were involved in the murder, then the murder itself wouldn't be traumatic for you. It might be a very emotional experience, but trauma usually happens from something unexpected, not from something that's expected. What she's saying is she is sensitive about a period of time that happened after. She's embarrassed about it when she says, to be honest. She's skipping over the time, but she tells you that she's skipping over it. And then she says, I don't remember much. And then she goes on to tell you a bunch of stuff that she does remember. So yes, technically, the I don't remember much is her way of saying that she was depressed and that she wasn't keeping track of a timeline, but she still actually has a bunch of memories. The reason I'm taking a moment to explain this is that just because you see a bunch of indicators doesn't automatically mean that the indicators of sensitivity are showing you malicious intent. What it's showing you is that there's issues with the memory and there's issues with the recounting of what they're remembering. That's usually due to malicious deception. But here we have to know a little bit about trauma in order to put this into context. And so with a little bit of experience, what we know here is that this is the way that a truthful person is going to remember the events of after trauma, whereas a person who was involved in the murder is going to have much clearer memories. They are not traumatized by the murder. They now are going into fight or flight mode because they need to cover their tracks. And what happens then is the opposite of this. What happens to somebody who is now becoming very purposeful in trying to cover their tracks is you have very detailed memory of everything that happened. If you remember back to September 11th or JFK's assassination or the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding, these things were traumatic for us if you're old enough to remember those things, but you remember every detail because it's not PTSD, it's a less personal trauma. It's something that you remember every detail of. So if Kelsi was involved in the murders here, you would see a very clear recollection of all of the details afterwards, whereas you get her very sensitive about not remembering things. What someone needs to tell her is that's okay. That is how somebody who wasn't involved in the murder deals with trauma.
It was countless interrogations, countless news reporters coming to the house, countless people bringing over bread and pasta. And that's what I remember from those days. I remember laying in my bed crying, and I remember my grandparents crying together. And I remember very vividly the day that I asked my grandparents if we could move my bed into their bedroom, because I couldn't sleep knowing that there was somebody out there. And I wasn't able to talk to anyone about it.
Now, she goes on to say, it was countless interrogations, countless news reporters coming to the house, countless people bringing over bread and pasta, which is very common. It's just a blur of things like that. And then she says, and that's what I remember from those days. I remember lying in my bed crying, and I remember my grandparents crying together. And I remember very vividly the day that I asked my grandparents if we could move my bed into their bedroom. Notice she's telling you right now, I remember those things.
Yeah, she's telling the truth about the grief.
She's telling you in the present moment. The deception tag was I remembered. It was past tense. She's telling you that at that time she remembered something. And that is often a deception tag, because when somebody tells you back in my memory, I was remembering something. I remembered something in my memory. That is often a deception tag because you can't say something if you're not remembering it. So the fact that you have to mention it means that it's sensitive to you. And if it's sensitive, it's likely wrapped around deception. Here, she's actually, this is present tense, and she's telling you right now, I couldn't remember a lot of things. It was blurry, but what I do remember, and it's in present tense, which is the correct tense. So these are not deception tags because of the tense. So everything is truthful all of the way down until the end. And then she says, move my bed into their bedroom because I couldn't sleep. That is a explanatory statement plus a negative statement, which is a deception indicator. So she says, because I couldn't sleep, knowing that there was somebody out there. Okay, keep in mind that, and I don't say this enough, but if you look through my videos, you see this pattern, which is when you have an explanatory statement plus a negative statement, the deception is not necessarily about, in fact, it's often not about what's happening in that sentence. The deception is going to be within that paragraph, but not necessarily in the sentence that they're over-explaining and giving you negative statements about things that they didn't do. So here she says, because I couldn't sleep, knowing that there was somebody out there and I wasn't able to talk to anyone about it. So the sensitivity from the deception indicator here is that I wasn't able to talk to anyone about it. She was able to talk to people about it. She chose not to. And again, her involvement with Anthony Shot.
Hold on. Where's my? Let me find. I'm not on the ball right here.
Bruh.
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 Did you just hear that? As he's hit or miss, but let's back it up a little, okay?
Negative statements about things that they didn't do. So here she says, because I couldn't sleep, knowing that there was somebody out there and I wasn't able to talk to anyone about it. So the sensitivity from the deception indicator here is that I wasn't able to talk to anyone about it. She was able to talk to people about it. She chose not to. And again, her involvement with Anthony Shots and knowing that somebody who's out there, she has a much clearer idea of who that person is than anyone else around her involved in the investigation and her family. She has a piece of vital information that she's not sharing because she doesn't want to be villainized. Remember her personality. She wants to be seen as the hero. Being seen as the villain is the worst possible thing that could happen to her in her own mind. So she decides here to keep quiet about it, which is deception. You have deception through omission here. She is omitting telling people about Anthony Shots. And so this statement.
One more time.
Omitting telling people about Anthony Shots. And
One more time.
Which is deception. You have deception through omission here. She is omitting telling people about Anthony Shots. And so this statement becomes deceptive. You see deception indicators here because she's withholding this information. She says, I wasn't able to talk about it. This is leakage. Okay, so let's move on to the next.
I was scared to talk to my grandparents. I was scared to talk to any of my family, really. And I think that's mainly because I knew they were hurting too. Trying to go through something when everybody around you is hurting too. You don't want them to hurt like you're hurting. And so you just keep quiet.
Statement here. I was scared to talk to my grandparents. I was scared to talk to any of my family, really. And I think that's mainly because I knew they were hurting too, trying to get through something when everybody around you is hurting too. You don't want them to hurt like you're hurting, and so you just keep quiet. Now, in this paragraph, you see a reduction of commitment from really. She says, I was scared to talk to any of my family, really. And I think is another reduction of commitment. And then she says mainly, which is another reduction of commitment. All of that is problematic here. What is she reducing commitment to so much? That she was scared to talk to her family. Okay, so she was scared to talk to her family, but she's insinuating here that the reason why she was scared, actually, she's telling you that's mainly because I knew they were hurting too. And that's the lie. That's why you have so much reduction of commitment.
Oh, once more time, Sergio.
She was scared to talk to her family. Okay, So she was scared to talk to her family, but she's insinuating here that the reason why she was scared, actually, she's telling you that's mainly because I knew they were hurting too. And that's the lie. That's why you have so much reduction of commitment and then an explanatory statement. She doesn't want her family, the media, the public to see her as the villain. She doesn't want to admit that she knew that there was a random man from the internet that they were going to meet there, because that would draw blame onto her. And so she doesn't want to talk about it.
So if she's going to, if Libby or Abby are going to meet a random man on the internet named Anthony Schatz, where does Rick Allen fit in all this?
She doesn't want to tell anybody about it. But here, she's telling you that she had an internal conflict. She wanted to tell people, but she didn't want the repercussions upon herself that would happen because of telling people about that. And then she says, you don't want them to hurt like you're hurting, and so you just keep quiet. That's a negative statement plus an explanatory statement. The explanatory plus the negative plus the explanatory plus the 3 reductions of commitment is all telling you that the reason that she's giving to you for not telling people is bunk. So the reason that she doesn't want people to know is because she doesn't want to be blamed or villainized here. Now, I wrote a note here, and I'm going to read you this note exactly as I wrote it. This is traumatic. Kelsi made a decision as a 17-year-old girl to try and let her sister have an experience with a boy that she decided to keep from her parents. Kelsi was trying to be a good sister. She was trying to be a cool sister. She was trying to be someone that her younger sister would look up to. Not that that is implicitly a good thing. That's just based on her personality. She wanted to be looked up to. It's important to remember a few points here. Number one, it wasn't Kelsi's responsibility to be Libby's mother. So right now, if you're following all of this, then you're either putting yourself in Kelsi's shoes and understanding how important it can be to an older sibling to have your younger siblings look up to you, or you're still trying to villainize her. So if you're going to continue to villainize her for simply trying to give her sister an experience that she knew could be dangerous, but she thought legitimately that the worst wasn't going to happen, there's some things you have to keep in mind. First, it wasn't Kelsi's responsibility to be Libby's mother. So if you're blaming her for taking her there, you have to keep in mind that she is her older sister, not her mother or her grandmother. She's not charged with the responsibility of raising her and preventing her from having any bad or negative experiences. That's not the job of a sibling. And the next thing to keep in mind is that no one ever wants to blame a child for their actions, but Libby was the one who was messaging Anthony Schatz. Now, it's possible that Kelsi was messaging him too, but in here, Libby was the victim and Abby. But Libby, nobody wants to blame the victim. And that's fine. I'm not blaming the victim either. The only person who's responsible for Abby and Libby's death is the killer. But if you're going to assign blame to Kelsi for driving them there and not telling anybody, you also have to assign an element of blame to the girls who were creating the relationship with Anthony Schatz. And now if you're going to say, well, they were 14, she was 17. Well, I mean, 14 years old is not 4 years old. 14-year-olds still should know better. And then if you're going to say, but at 17 years old, you're almost an adult, you should know everything at that point. No, the human brain is not fully developed until age 25.
No, but the point, Sergio, the lies. We've just gone through a multitude of lies and gaps in the narrative or in the timeline. So there's a whole string of lies, of deception. There's all the gaps in the narrative or the timeline, and we're still making excuses for it.
So a 17-year-old still has a long ways to go until the prefrontal cortex is completely developed, which means a 17-year-old, if you're looking at her like she's 47 years old and should have had that level of responsibility, you're just clearly not remembering what it was like to be 17, because I made some of the dumbest mistakes. I still can't believe some of the stuff that I did when I was between the ages of 17 and 20, because that was where I had an element of freedom and I didn't have the brain power to figure out that I shouldn't be doing that stuff. And so I guess I can understand making bad decisions because I can relate to that. But it's just important to note that. Just keep reality in mind as you're going through this. It will really help to keep everything in context here. Now, the last thing to keep in mind is when Libby and Abby were murdered, Kelsi didn't know what to do. She made the decision to drive the girls there and not tell anyone that they were meeting a man from the internet there. Now, in hindsight, that was obviously a bad decision. But if we're being honest, is there a single 17-year-old in America who hasn't made much worse decisions? Now, finally, the last thing I want to leave you with on that question is Kelsi now has to bear the weight of those decisions, and that will probably crush her at some point in her life. This is not the type of trauma that people can deal with, and it hasn't been long enough. It's only been, 8 years? She was 17, so now she's, 25? She's just becoming an adult as far as the development of her brain is concerned right now. So she has to begin processing what happened as an adult, and she's going to go through the entire process that you may be going through right now. You should have known better. And she's going to start thinking, I should have known better. And she's going to assign blame to herself, which is the blame that she was trying to avoid having the public put upon her, is what she's going to start putting upon herself now. So if you're wondering, when do people usually break?
No, not if she's a sociopath. Sociopaths don't do that. They can manage just fine.
Kind of weight? I had somebody ask me that question. It usually happens somewhere between age 30 and age 50 is where you see those books come out, the bios, this is what I did, this is the whole truth. You see that because as an adult, the people who are involved in these types of situations have to come to terms with what happened, and they have to look at it as an adult. All right, so we're almost done here. Let's look to the next point here.
In the beginning, I trusted the police a lot. There were times I got really angry because I felt like they were interrogating me more than anyone else. And at that point, they probably were. I was the last person to see the girls, and I understand that now. But at the time, that was the worst part of everything. It was so defeating knowing that they wanted to talk to me again, knowing that I needed to give my DNA to them a third time, knowing that they were still questioning whether I knew what happened.
Okay, she says, now she's talking about the police. She says, in the beginning, all right, so that's missing time. In the beginning means that it's not the same now.
More missing time.
I trusted the police a lot. Okay, well, we got the answer to that. She trusted them, and now she doesn't. So why? There were times I got really angry because I felt like they were interrogating me more than anyone else. Okay, they were interrogating her more than anyone else because she had information that she was withholding. Here we have a tricky area here because the police clearly made way too many mistakes for that to be unintentional. So there's a level of incompetence that borders on corruption with this police department here. Now, we also, on the other hand, we have Kelsi who's withholding information. So what this means is that, again, you have to think reality here. The police department is corrupt doesn't mean that every single person there is corrupt. It can mean one person is corrupt, and they're corrupting the information that everybody else has, or telling people that they have certain information when they don't, which makes the good cops there do the wrong things because they don't have the right information. And so I'm not saying everyone in that department is bad. I'm saying that we can see that they misprocessed things, like taking her DNA 3 times. That should never happen. But the fact that she was withholding information means that all of the good cops, they're getting bad information from both the witnesses and from somebody in their department. So
Was it 7 interviews with the FBI?
we have all these problems here for the police department, but that's an issue that we're going to tackle in a minute. Let's get through this statement. There were times I got really angry because I felt like they were interrogating me more than anyone else. And at that point, we have another missing time statement. They probably were. What's the missing time? Why'd she say at that point? At that point is the point where they were missing information. That's why you have a missing information statement here. They didn't know about Anthony's shots. They find out later when they run the phones, but they didn't get that from Libby. Then she says, I was the last person to see the girls. Now, yes, she's making up an excuse as to why they were interrogating her, but notice what's important to me is she says the girls again. We still, even now, were removed from their deaths. So all the way leading up, right after the moment of the murder, and then even far into the future, she still calls them the girls. And then she says, and I understand that now, but at the time, that was the worst part of everything. It was so defeating, knowing that they wanted to talk to me again, knowing that I needed to give them my DNA to them a third time, knowing that they were still questioning whether I knew what happened. So what does all this tell you? It was defeating. Now she used that word again as the third time. The first time was when they called off the search, which was due to not knowing about Anthony Schatz. And now she says it's defeating because they are interrogating her more than anyone else, again, because they don't know about Anthony Schatz. Now, she says she doesn't say I was defeated. So the very personal defeating happened when she saw that the girls had been murdered, again, by Anthony Schatz, by the one that she knows. So every time she uses the word defeat, it revolves around Anthony Schatz. And she doesn't like the police. We get that from this too. So the last question here.
And now I know that they were doing their job and they still are. And everything they're doing is for us and for the girls. And they are doing such a tremendous job now. I think they've messed up a lot. And
who told her to use that word in reference to the job the police are doing? That word just jumped out at me. It's almost like a talking point.
and they still are. And everything they're doing is for us and for the girls. And they are doing such a tremendous job now. I think they've messed up a lot. And I think they're making up for that in different ways. But I have a lot of faith in them, and I know that they're going to be the reason this is solved. In the beginning, there were a lot of things they didn't know. So now that they know more than they did then, they're able to investigate better. They're able to use different technology. They're able to use resources that they maybe didn't have before.
And now I know that they were doing their job, and they still are. And everything they're doing is for us and for the girls. And they're doing such a tremendous job now. I think they've messed up a lot. So she just throws that in there. And I think they're making up for it in different ways. I think it's a reduction of commitment. So I think they messed up a lot. Why is she reducing her commitment there? Well, because she caused some of that. And then she says, I think they're making up for it in different ways. She clearly wanted them to find the Anthony Schatz account without her having to tell them. And then her assumption was that she would never get tied to that and the murder would get solved. She was hoping that all of that could happen without her being drawn into this. As she sees that that's not happening, she's disappointed. But her disappointment, again, is linked back to her own lack of being forthcoming with the information that she had. But I have a lot of faith in them. A lot means not complete. And I know that they're going to be the reason that this is solved. In the beginning, there was a lot of things they didn't know. Again, missing time. And again, she's saying there's things they didn't know, which is what she was supposed to be telling them. Okay. So now that they know more than they did, so now that they know about Anthony Schatz, then they're able to investigate better. They're able to use different technology. They're able to use the technology reference is the phones. So again, this still ties back. She's still tying all of this back to Anthony Schatz, the phone records, the cloud information, the Dropbox account. They're able to use resources that they maybe didn't have before. Do you see how the indicators are so clear? All of the missing time refers to in the beginning of the investigation. All of that missing time is always the missing information about Anthony Schatz that Kelsi had. That's why it's her missing time information, because she had that information and didn't give it to them. So that's the end of that statement. The next statement that we're going to look at, we're going to just drive straight into here, is the car ride transcript. And I will say that I realized here that interrogating somebody while they're driving is a really good tactic, because it is very, very difficult. It puts a stress load on your brain. Your brain has to drive. Your senses are taking in a lot of information while you're driving, and that really reduces your ability to fabricate. And so you're either going to get straight truth or you're going to get a lot of indicators.
With a normal person, now with the sociopath, I don't know, Sergio.
So it's been almost 2 years. Does it feel like that?
It's been almost 2 years. Does it feel like that?
No, it feels like it was yesterday. It's crazy that it's actually been that long.
No, she answers up front. It feels like it was yesterday. That's a truthful statement. Have you driven this road again since?
Have you driven this route again since?
I did drive it that day, and we've been out here a couple times just to go to the bridge and see the little memorials that are down there.
I did. She answers it right up front. She drives it, whatever, gives a little bit of information. It's a truthful statement. Do you remember that day what you said to them?
So as we approach here, do you remember that day what you said to them?
Well, I wasn't really talking to them. They were mostly talking to each other.
And she says, well, I wasn't really talking to them. So the word well and the phrase wasn't really talking to them means that she was talking to them, but she's insinuating that it wasn't a lot. So now, because of the insinuation, we need to figure out if the literal words that she's saying matches the insinuation or not. Wasn't talking to them. They were mostly talking to each other. So now we have another skewing of the time, mostly. So wasn't really talking to them means that they were mostly talking to each other. And then she says they were mostly talking to each other. That's a perfect distribution of that. And so that makes this a truthful response because the reductions of commitment both mean the same thing. And the literal meaning of what she's saying is exactly the same as what she's insinuating. And she answered up front, this is a truthful statement. Do you remember what they were saying in the back seat? Was it just like any other day?
Do you remember what they were saying in the back seat on this portion of the drive, or it was just like anything else, any other day?
It was just like any other day. We had the music up really loud, and we were like singing and just some normal things that we did in the car together.
And she says, it was just like any other day. So she answers it up front.
That's not how the photo looks. You guys remember the photo.
That's technically a bad question because she should have ended that question with, do you remember what they were saying in the back seat? That's what I highlighted here, and she should have stopped talking there. But she said, was it just like any other day? That's a leading question, and when you ask a leading question like that, the answer is going to repeat the lead. Now, she says, it was just like any other day. Okay, so that doesn't mean anything there because it's a leading question. Then she says, we is an indicator of togetherness. It means up to this point, she's talking about herself and the girls. There's no conflict. We had the music up really loud, and we were like singing and just the normal things that we did in the car together. So there is sensitivity here. We have two reductions of commitment, like and just. It means they weren't just singing in the car together. There's something that she's leaving out here. What is she leaving out?
What's in the photo?
Well, remember, we're going back in time here. So this is before she dropped them off. There was a conversation. We're getting indicators that are indicating the same information that we got the first time. They were probably having a talk in the car, not a lot, not talking about it a lot, but she mentioned it again that it's probably not a good idea to go meet somebody that you met on the internet. And that was, and were they making a lot of noise in the backseat? Do you remember what they were saying and doing? So she rephrases the question. She asks it a much better way this time because she ends the question with the actual question.
And were they making a lot of noise in the back seat? Do you remember what they were saying or what they were doing?
Olivia was actually in the front, and Abby was in the back. So we were listening to music really loud, and we had the windows down. We were listening to some of Libby's favorite songs, like Heathens by 21 Pilots, that kind of thing.
So 21 Pilots, Heathens was playing that day. That plays in your mind.
And then right away, she starts the answer with Libby was actually up front. So they weren't both in the back talking, and Abby was in the back. So we were listening to music really loud, and we had the windows down. Lots of we's, lots of togetherness here. We were listening to some of Libby's favorite songs like Heathens by 21 Pilots, that kind of thing. So again, togetherness, but again, reductions of commitment. The word just, the words that kind of thing. She's again just omitting a conversation here. She's omitting the same conversation that she just talked about. Then is the afternoon around 1? She says, yeah, like 1:30.
And it was the afternoon, right? It was around 1 o'clock?
Yeah, like 1:30.
So yeah, it's just the question, but then she gives a little bit more specific information, like 1:30. That's truthful. And when you dropped them off, you said, bye, take your sweater. Did they not want to take the sweater or their jacket?
Yeah.
And when you dropped them off, you said, bye, take your sweater. Did they not want to take their sweater or their jacket?
Libby didn't think that she needed to because of how nice it was, but I was like, come on, you know that you're going to need it because it's kind of shaded over there. So she ended up taking it, and Abby had like a short sleeve shirt on, so I was like, come on, you guys can take my sweatshirt. So they both had my sweatshirts on. I remember my last words to them. When they were getting out of the car, I made sure they had sweatshirts. And I told Libby I loved her.
And then she says, Libby didn't think that she needed to. And she phrases that with that pitch inflection again, didn't think that she needed to. So again, this is in regards to what they're wearing. And we have that pitch inflection that indicates deception here. Libby didn't think that she needed to because, so we have didn't and because, which is a negative plus an explanatory statement, which indicates deception. So We have the voice inflection, and we have the negative and the explanatory, which is an indicator of deception, of how nice it was. But I was like, come on, you know that you're going to need it because it's kind of shaded over there. But I was like is a reduction of commitment. Come on, you know that you're going to need it because is an explanatory. It's kind of is a reduction of commitment, shaded over there. So this is made up, this part right here about taking the sweaters. And then she says, so, another explanatory statement. She ended up taking it, and Abby had, like another reduction of commitment, a short sleeve shirt on. So, another explanatory statement. I was like another reduction of commitment. Come on, guys. You guys can take my sweatshirts. So, another explanatory. This is because she's driving. This is why you get the same indicators over and over and over again here. So by the time she gets to, so they both had my shirts on, we have 5 explanatory statements. We have like, kind of, like, and like. So that's 4 reductions of commitment. We have didn't, which is a negative, which means we have an indicator of deception here. And then we have the pitch inflection. So what all of that means, plus it's 61 words before they get to, so they both had my sweatshirts on, so they didn't both have her sweatshirts on. That's what she's telling you. But why? Why is she telling you that that they had her sweatshirts on? That I don't get that information in here. So I don't know why she's telling you this. The only thing I know is that she knows that they weren't wearing her sweatshirts. I remember my last words to them when they were getting out of the car. I made sure they had sweatshirts. She repeats that. Anytime you repeat something, that makes it sensitive. So they had my sweatshirts on. That's another indicator. And then I told Libby I loved her. Told is the positive way of saying that. So she did tell her that. The best that I can tell here, and this is my speculating at this point, the sweatshirts had to be correlated in her mind with some level of protection from the elements, that sort of, what's another word for protection? That sort of element of caring for somebody. Think about the flip side of what they're actually dealing with here. So they're going to meet someone from the internet and they're going to hook up. So when she says they had my sweatshirt, I told them to take sweatshirts. Did she mean, was she replacing the word condoms with the word sweatshirts? Or was she simply just using that as a metaphor for being careful? It seems to me like she's overemphasizing physical protection, the sweatshirts, with not being stupid when they go to meet someone on the internet. Now that's, like I said, just a theory. I don't know what the issue with the sweatshirts is. I have a feeling that at some point in the future, she'll write a book and she's going to explain what she meant with the sweatshirts, or why, or was it literally just she said that in the beginning because she thought that that was the case. Like she said to take her sweatshirts and they just took their own sweatshirts. And so she thought that they had her sweatshirts. And then she just doubled down on that because she didn't want to look wrong. Again, she wants to be that authoritative figure. She doesn't want to be seen as being wrong. So that's possible too. It could be just that simple. And then she said she told her that she loved her. And then the question is, what did she say?
What did she say back?
She told me she loved.
Sorry about that. I wanted to show this. So give me a moment. Let me remove. All right. Just wanted to pause for a moment to show this. And remember, I did this for you guys. Let me see. Let's see if I can do this. Remember, I pulled this one. Let's see. Oh my, come on. What in the world? Okay.
you and that she'd see me later.
She says, she told me she loved me too and that she'd see me later. This seems true. But remember, in the first statement, there was sensitivity here. In the previous statement, when Libby told Kelsi that she loved her, Kelsi didn't use the word told. Kelsi used the word said, which had a little more negative impact to it. Here she uses the word told. So let's see if we get anything after this. Then she says, how long after you dropped them off did someone call you and say we can't find her?
How long after you dropped them off did someone call you and say we can't find them?
I think it would have been 2.5 hours later is when I got the call from my grandma.
She says it would have been 2.5 hours later. Later's missing time. What happened during that missing time? That was the time that was with her boyfriend. We already covered that in depth. We know why that's missing time. You probably thought it was no big deal, or did you immediately start worrying?
You probably thought it was no big deal, that nothing was wrong, or did you immediately start to worry?
I figured it was just something like I forgot to do the dishes or something along those lines, or maybe she was trying to see where I was. I never would have imagined it was her calling to tell me my sister was missing.
She says, I figured it was just something like I forgot to do the dishes. There's pitch inflection there. So it wasn't doing the dishes that she was afraid of. It was what she was doing with her boyfriend. She thought that her grandma was calling to check up to make sure that she wasn't screwing around with her boyfriend, or she didn't want to get caught. Then she says something along those lines. So it's either the dishes or getting caught with my boyfriend. Or maybe she was trying to see where I was. So that's maybe it's reduction of commitment. She's just throwing out possibilities here. That's called dilution, when you keep throwing out possibilities. Then she says, I never would have imagined. So never would have is an indicator of deception here. So never would have imagined means that she had imagined this, which is just indicating to you that she knew about Anthony's shots beforehand and thought that it was a bad idea. Because when she says she never would have imagined it was her calling to tell me my sister was missing, that is something that she had been worried about since the night before. That when she found out that they were going to meet some guy on the internet, every indicator in here says that she was telling them that that was a bad idea. And so obviously never would have imagined that would not be truthful here, and it comes across as not truthful. Then she says, and did you worry right away as soon as you heard that she's missing because that's not like her, or were you calm at the beginning?
And did you worry right away as soon as you heard she was missing because that's not like her, or were you calm in the beginning?
In the beginning, I was kind of calm. I was worried, but I figured like it was like there was a simple explanation for what was happening. I didn't think it would be what it was.
I don't think anyone did.
No, I don't think so either.
She says in the beginning, which means not at the end, I was kind of calm. So reduction of commitment. I was worried. So she immediately retracts that reduction of commitment. I was worried, but I figured like it was like two reductions of commitment here. I figured like it was like there was a simple explanation for what was happening. So why do you have reductions of commitment? Because there's deception there.
Okay, stop. Because of course he's going to gloss over this part. Okay, of course he's going to gloss. So point he just made, deception here. So let's back this up a few seconds and see what is the deception here. Okay, why would it be important? So let's see.
So she immediately retracts that reduction of commitment. I was worried, but I figured like it was like two reductions of commitment here. I figured like it was like there was a simple explanation for what was happening. So why do you have reductions of commitment? Because there's deception there. Was she worried? Yes. She says, I was worried. So that negates the kind of calm. And then she says, but I figured like it was like there was a simple explanation. She was worried that something had happened based on the guy on the bridge. That's what she's telling you here.
Sergio just twisted my brain in knots with gobbledygook. I mean, I can't even keep up with what he just said. So I don't know if he knows what he just said. He's saying there's deception around this point. Okay. Did you worry right away as soon as you heard she's missing? Or were you calm? So she says, I was calm. I didn't think it would be what it was. That's deception. So she already knew. She already knew it was bad. So she wants people to think that she was calm and wasn't worried. But of course, no, she already knew. Okay, so I'll back him up a few seconds, but he just says a bunch of
She was worried that something had happened based on the guy on the bridge. That's what she's telling you here. I didn't think
She was worried that something had happened based on whatever.
it would be what it was. That's a truthful statement. I didn't think it would be what it was. So how do you mix that truthful statement into all the deception before? Well, what it was murder. And she didn't think that that was what it was. She thought that it would be sexual assault, rape. She thought that it was going to end up being bad. But she didn't have any idea at that point that it would be murder. And that is exactly what we saw through her first recounting of this. So these are matching up exactly. Even though the verbiage is different, the indicators are telling you the exact same story is what I'm saying. I don't think anyone did. No, I don't think so either. Are you glad you said I love you?
Are you glad you said I loved you?
Yeah, I'm glad that I got to say it one more time.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to say it. I'm sorry, I don't like that. All right.
Said I love you.
Are you glad you said I loved you?
Yeah, I'm glad that I got to say it one more time.
Okay, remember there was sensitivity around this in the first statement, and we didn't see that same sensitivity yet when she says she told me that she loved me and she'd see me later. So now she says, yeah, and there's a long pause there. Then she says, I'm glad that I got to say it one more time. This is tremendous. The way that she says that has a tremendous weight to it. Are you glad you said I love you? And she says, yeah, I'm glad I got to say it one more time. There is what's happening. What you're seeing in her mind right there is the words are truthful, but the emotion behind it is tortured. And she's reliving in the moment where Libby's walking away, and she had the ability to forcibly stop her at that point, but she didn't take that opportunity. And she's reliving it in that moment as she's telling you the words that are truthful. And so that's why you have to be careful when you see the emotions that don't match the verbiage. It does mean deception, but it
I'm not buying that one, Sergio. I'm not buying that one.
doesn't mean that it's malicious all the time. So it's important to understand how the emotions marry up with that. So there you go. That's why she said told before, because yeah, she is glad that she got to say it one last time. But what she's thinking right there is that shouldn't have been the last time. If I would have taken different actions right there, that wouldn't have been the last time. It's not like her sister got in a car accident. It's not like it was unrelated to Kelsi. Kelsi dropped her off there. And while I would never blame someone for that, she's going to blame herself for that. And that's what you see right there. All right, so now we have an interesting question here. So they had asked you before this time, will you drive us? Will you drive us? And you never said yes. Okay, that is a very crucial part of this question. You never said yes. And then this time, you knew you were going to see your boyfriend and you had the time to bring them. Okay, first, as we go through this, you're going to see tremendous reduction of commitment, and then you're going to see indicators of deception. So let's go through this and let's figure out why we have the reduction of commitment and why we have indicators of deception.
So they had asked you before this time, will you drive us? Will you drive us? And you never said yes. And then this time, you knew you were going to see your boyfriend and you had the time to bring them?
I mean, it wasn't really like, they weren't always asking me to take them to Highbridge, but Libby would always ask me to take her to places like, can we go to McDonald's, or can we go to Lafayette and go to see a movie? And it seemed like I was always saying no because I didn't want to go all the way to Lafayette, or I didn't have money to pay for it. So, yeah, this time I decided I'd said no enough that like I could handle taking her this time.
She says, I mean, that tells you right now she's not answering the question in the beginning. That's a big indicator of deception. It wasn't really reduction of commitment with a negative statement like another reduction of commitment. They weren't negative statement. Always is like never. So it's a nonsense word asking me to take them to Highbridge. All right. So we have deception and sensitivity around Highbridge. Clearly,
of course,
going to Highbridge is something that they did often, not always saying no, which is what was, never said yes. So she took them often to Highbridge, probably to meet boys. Remember, that ties back to she knew where to search for them if they were going willingly, make out points.
Hold on.
That's what's on
what
her
did he
mind
just
here.
say?
But Libby...
Hold on. See, he just he blasts through the things he should slow down and actually talk about. Once again.
Is something that they did often, not always saying no, which is what was, oh yeah, never said yes. So she took them often to Highbridge, probably to meet boys. Remember? Is something that they did often, not always saying no, which is what was, oh yeah, never said yes. So she took them often to Highbridge, probably to meet boys. Remember, that ties back to she knew where to search for them if they were going willingly, make out points. That's what's on her mind here. But Libby would always ask me to take her to places. Can we go to McDonald's or can we go to Lafayette to see a movie?
Change of subject.
And it seemed like, so
Change
reduction
subject.
of commitment, reduction
McDonald's,
of commitment. I was
Lafayette,
always,
blah, blah, blah.
always again is a overly definitive term, saying no. And then because I didn't, so that's explanatory plus a negative. So we're going into deception again here. Plus, this is well over 90 words here too. So we have deception in structure, and we have the answer at the end, and we have all this reduction of commitment. So I was always saying no. So she wasn't always saying no because I didn't want them to go all the way to Lafayette. She was taking them on a regular basis to Highbridge is what she's getting at here, because they had money to pay for it. So yeah, this time I decided, I said no enough. Can we have more reduction of commitment? I said no enough that like reduction of commitment, I could handle taking her this time. So she had taken her there numerous times before to meet boys. That is what all of this is leading up to. All this deception, all this reduction of commitment, all this very long answer is telling you that they went there in the past regularly. And which, again, in your mind, that should be telling you why it didn't seem as scary to Kelsi as it should have. Because if that was the first time she'd ever taken her there and it was to meet a guy from the internet at 17 years old, you would think, okay, that's too much. But if she was taking Libby there on a regular basis to meet with boys, now the only difference is that this is a boy from the internet, then you can see how she went down that slippery slope. Do you regret that?
Do you regret that?
Yeah. I wish I would have been a mean sister and just said no.
Yeah, I wish I would have been a mean sister and just said no. So we have use of the word I 3 times in the beginning here. So this is very personal to her. Do you regret that? I. But this isn't repeating I. There's words in between here. This is overcommitment to this. So you're seeing something that's hitting her very close to home. Do you regret that? Yeah. So she answers it right up front. I wish I would have been a mean sister. This is the weight that she is bearing right now. This is a short, direct answer. She answers in the beginning. She uses I continuously in here. And I can feel the weight that she's saying here, that she wished she would have been a mean sister and she wished she would have just said no. That tells you everything right there. And then she says, but you know it's not your fault.
But
You know it's not your fault.
I'm getting there. I'm learning that, I guess.
She says, I'm getting there. I'm learning that. So I'm getting there. I'm learning that. It's not telling you that she knows that it's not her fault. It's telling you that she's aware that there's a process to get there. And then she takes that all back and she says, I guess. That means she is not getting there and she is not learning that. That means that Kelsi is under tremendous pressure right here. This statement is a cry for help. And regardless of what you feel about her up to this point, I think Kelsi's greatest flaw was that she was willing to take unnecessary risk in order to be looked up to. That's her personality right there. That she just wanted to be admired. And in the end, that caused her to make some bad decisions when she was young. And as she gets older now and becomes an adult, the weight of what happened is going to crush her unless she gets very serious help here. So that's my takeaway from this. So the last thing that I want to touch on here, Kelsi does a podcast that she hosts and she interviews Doug Harder, who is the superintendent of the Indiana State Police. And I thought, if she's the host, she's not the one answering questions here. You only get good information from the people who are answering questions. I mean, unless you're getting leakage, like in the case of the interrogator who was interrogating Richard Allen, and you get leakage that he had involvement in bad policing. So I figured, let's look at this.
You mean planting the bullet? Yeah, planting the bullet?
Let's see what we can see here. I don't think the questions are going to be softballs anyways, so we're not going to see anything about Kelsi. So let's take a look at that.
Really big rumor that the police are covering something up, which is not happening. And I think people could just look at the fact that the law enforcement is going with us to do all these things and realize that that's not what's happening. Like, they're putting so much effort into this. There's no way that they could be.
All right, so the question, and she's very nervous about asking the question, but she's talking about, is the Indiana State Police, of which Doug Carter's the superintendent, are they covering something up? That she gets around to it in a very non-confrontational way. But all right, let's see what he has to say on this.
Conversations.
Hold on. I need to go back and look at this again. He says, did he just say I? That was that's one of my biggest indicators. So let me look at that response again. Hold on. I promise you that's not happening. Okay. That alone is, I mean, I can't emphasize how big of a problem that is. We just looked at 2 entire episodes of Kelsi and didn't get one single indicator that she had anything to do directly with this. And now the very first thing out of Doug Carter's mouth is I. Hold on. Okay. Let me see what else he has to say here.
I promise you that's not happening. And while I'm here, there will be nothing of the like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a rumor. And that, today in today's world, again, it's easy to say something like that, but take a step back and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur. And it's just not.
Okay, let's analyze this. Okay, hold on. I got to get a transcript here. Okay, so here's the transcript of what he says. Let's go through this. He says, I promise you. He says, I promise you that's not happening. And it's 3 repeated words. While I'm here, there'll be nothing of the like. So he doesn't say that won't happen. He says, remember, okay, so when somebody uses like this, it's the same as me saying, you see this red ball in my hand that I'm not letting you really see? Take a bite out of this. It tastes just like an apple. That the only thing you know is that it's whatever I'm trying to feed you here is not an apple. And so when he says, and while I'm here, there'll be nothing of the like, that's very problematic. We have 2 massive indicators of deception. He doesn't answer the question. He doesn't say no. He says, I promise you that's not happening. So the answer comes at the end of the sentence, which is deception. So we have and, which is an indicator of sensitivity. Then we have of, which is an indicator of sensitivity. And then we have 3 hard indicators of deception here. Then he says, and that's just a rumor, just that reduction of commitment. So he doesn't say that's a rumor. He says that's just a rumor, which is an indicator of deception there. And that, because we don't know. If you say you have to actually know in order to say that. When somebody says that's what that literally means, is that I'm explaining or I'm talking to you about a very technical or difficult subject that you already know about. You have a lot of knowledge about that. And so instead of me re-explaining something that you already know, I'm just going to say So if we're watching a football game and you already know the rules to football, we watch football together, and I'm trying to explain how difficult of a situation there is. I'm like, so they got a personal foul, that takes you back 15 yards. Because the person does know. You don't have to explain everything about the rules there. You can just say and it skips over a bunch of stuff. When you ask somebody, is the police department corrupt? And they say, then that is an indicator of deception. Okay, and that today in that is sensitivity, but then we have today, and this right here is a repeating word. In today's world is, I guess, is a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that is another reduction of commitment. Don't want to use that anymore. So, and that so that's an indicator of deception. Today is an indicator of sensitivity. In is an indicator of sensitivity. Today's world is, I guess, a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that. and he's refusing to actually say. Again, this is the second time he has refused to say the accusation out loud, which is a massive indicator of sensitivity, of deception that I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel before.
Wow.
But if you're unwilling to state the accusation, then that is because of how close to home it hits. So then he says, but stake, take, that's a repetition of a word, and it's a misstatement of a word. So it's two indicators of sensitivity right there. A step back. So this right here this is a threat. Take a step back. That is leakage. It's what I normally call a confession. But in here, the other type of leakage like this, other than a confession, is a threat. Take a step back and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur. And it's just not. So the closest thing that you get here to a denial is not a denial. It is the lack, very specifically the lack of a denial. It's just is a reduction of commitment, not. So what do we actually have here? We have a hard indicator of deception. We have an indicator of sensitivity. While I'm here, there'll be nothing of that's an indicator of sensitivity of the like. That is a hard indicator of deception because he's not willing to repeat the accusation. And that's just a rumor, is a reduction of commitment. And that you know is a indicator of sensitivity. Today is an indicator of sensitivity. In is an indicator of sensitivity. World is, I guess, a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that, which is both a reduction of commitment and it's a refusal to acknowledge the accusation for the second time. But take a, there's two indicators here because it's a repeated word and then there's a misstated word here. A step back is a threat, and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur is just a nonsense statement. And it 4 times is more than just an indicator of sensitivity. Just is an indicator of sensitivity. And not is the third indicator that's refusal of him to acknowledge the accusation. And the answer is at the end of the statement, which is a hard indicator of deception. How many words is this? 74 words. This entire statement is a lie. This entire statement is extremely problematic. Okay. Instead of turning this video into a Doug Carter video, I'm going to start the next video with a recap of what we saw right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a bunch of Doug Carter's statements. He's made a lot of statements, so I need to baseline him. I seriously doubt if this is his baseline, that he just repeats every word, but I'm going to dig deeper into this. I'm going to get his baseline and I'm going to do a video where I analyze the statements that he makes. Well, you know what? About Richard Allen for sure, and anything about this case. So that'll be my next video. So that's it. I'm going to end this right here. Let's just call this a day. And now you know what I'm going to be working on for the next video. So I'm sure we will talk in depth about this on Amy's show, Case by Case. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's it. So remember, don't believe everything that you hear on the internet, and let's start to learn some of this stuff for yourself so that you can filter the stuff that you hear. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.
Wow, guys. Wow. We made it through. And a huge thank you to Sergio for that material and allowing us to review it. Wow. All I got to say is this. Don't look too good for Doug Carter, does it? Don't look too good for Doug Carter. I mean, whoo. That was about an 11 out of 10 in deception. In response to the question, is there a cover-up? Hey, thank you, Sergio. And we do look forward to your take on Doug Carter. We might not agree with all the conclusions on Kelsi, but we do appreciate all the observations. I told you that I agree with most of the observations of where the gaps in the narrative and the timeline are, and where the deception is. I just don't necessarily agree with the reasons that he tends to come up with. But I think that was a wonderful sit down through that. And I really do. I almost more than Kelsi, honestly, I do look more forward to taking a close look at Doug Carter's words. Because one thing I think any impartial observer should be able to clearly see is that there is a cover up in the Delphi murders. I mean, it's very obvious to most observers. So, yeah, can't wait, Sergio, and thank you again. I'm going to say goodbye to those in the chat. I think it's long. It's been a long show. We're approaching 4 hours. It was very long for me. And I'm glad I did the caffeine, though, because I was able to make it through. So appreciate the caffeine. Appreciate you guys for sticking around. And, man, who do I want to thank? I saw that we had so many super chats from Miss K. Miss K repeatedly gave super chats to try to get us to our limit, I think, or our goal. Let me see. I'm trying to see these other chats before we get out here. Thank you, Miss K. All right. All right. All right. Zaddy, Diana, Bezo Jones, Lisa, Maya, Carol, Sweet Dude Shibby, End of the Line, Trial Junkie, Topher, Pert Innit, Christina, ACV, Jake Brooks, Zaddy, Swade Smith, Miss Pie Crust, everyone who was here. Christine, appreciate you all so much. Let me say a special thanks to the donors tonight. That's Miss K, Amy, Dirty Diana, Nicole Watt, Keith Kellogg, Miss K another 5 times. Appreciate you all for contributing to the channel. And anyone who happens to be on the replay, please realize we have our support pathway scrolling down below. You can support the channel over at Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, or any other way you'd like to support, especially by leaving comments down below. So appreciate that. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been getting over a little medical condition, but give me some time and I'll be back at full steam, hopefully within a few weeks. And that's all I got to say about that. Let me see. Any final words, ladies and gentlemen? Carla Ann. Okay. Aaron Town. Samantha Springman. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm getting out of here. I'm really tired. Hey, I got something special for you guys. Oh, let me see. I pulled it up here. Let's see. Where is it? I'm slow on my buttons. I got to assign my buttons for here. Here we go.
Well, obviously, we have a rapist in Lincoln Park. He's climbing in your windows. He's snatching your people up, trying to rape them. So y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they raping everybody out here.
Bruh.
And that's it. Okay. And that's it. See y'all later. All right. And with that being said, good night. God bless you all. Hide your kids, hide your wife. God bless Libby and Abby.
Bye.